Привет, everyone. Welcome to another night of Late Nights with Lenin. And today we have a very special guest, Angelo Giuliano, who's joining us from Venezuela. How are you doing?
Hi, Isha. Nice to be back on your show.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
always great to have you because I like whenever here in the US, like they don't really tell you much about what's going on, and whenever I have you, it's always clear. Oh, this is okay. What the whole story is, not just half the story.
So what is the topic, Isha? Tell me about what do you want to talk about today?
Okay, well, the first thing is that earlier today I saw you tweet something out about Russia and China with regards to climate change and the Belt and Road initiatives. So, can you explain what the West is doing in the whatever climate summit and what and I guess what's just like what is the West trying to do, and what is the difference between what the West is trying to do and what Russia and China are trying to do?
So at the COP26 these days, they started a project called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And if you look at what is behind this, we are talking about the biggest globalists, the largest banks. We are talking about people that are very close to the World Economic Forum and also the Bilderberg Group, including, among those people, you have Mike Bloomberg.
Oh,
The co-chair is Mark Carney. He used to be the governor of the Bank of England, ex-Goldman Sachs. So you have those people that are clearly globalists. And what they want to do here with the COP26 is basically kind of rebranding, just trying to reincorporate the World Bank and the IMF. Plus, additional to that, all the big corporation and the big banks. So basically, it's a kind of a corporate takeover and rebranded under climate change. So my take on this, that China and Russia are not participating, is because they see what is behind. And as you see, Russia and China are the alternative to what we call the Washington Consensus. Washington Consensus is the IMF, the World Bank, and the globalist controlled by the big corporation. And so China and Russia are actually the other bloc. And China is a different alternative, what we call the Beijing Consensus, which is giving loads to the global south for construction of tangible assets, infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we are talking about a foundation for growth and prosperity,
yeah.
as opposed to the loans that the West is giving to the global South, which are as always linked to conditions and are going always against the country's sovereignty.
Well, one thing I did look up is China's high-speed rails. I mean, sorry, not high-speed, but China's train in between Nairobi and Mombasa. And what I learned is that before the train, people would have to, like, if you sold oranges or whatever, fruits or vegetables, you'd have to put it on a truck and drive, and there'd be like on a little highway where there were hundreds and hundreds of trucks. And now you just have one train taking it all. So like that itself like cuts down on so much emissions. So, and the West has had about 100 years to build these things, and they haven't. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. There are cases, absurd cases in Africa. we have lots of cases where people that live from that have to travel from one country to another, from Africa, they have to
Mm-hmm.
fly all the way to London and then fly back to Africa because there are no direct lines.
Oh,
This is
wow.
how absurd it is that.
Yeah.
So basically, and I think it's really important for people to understand that those infrastructure, when we are talking about railway, it's it's very useful for countries that are landlocked,
Mm-hmm.
that don't have access to sea. And also we need to look at what we call economic corridors, because
Mm-hmm.
when you build a road or railway, is everything that is being built around that, because it starts to build up what we call economic corridors. We are talking about industries, cities, and
Schools.
just development. Roads are the foundation for prosperity. By the way, Chinese, they say if you want to become rich, start building a road. And it's very simple. The thing is that Chinese, they plan. They plan. Where I don't know if you are familiar with the game Sim
Mm-mm.
City. Where you build up the whole
Oh,
city
yeah.
and
I
everything.
remember SimCity from way back in the day.
So basically, you don't build the houses and the schools and so on, and then you build up the roads.
Mm-hmm.
The roads, when you can do planification, you build up the infrastructure, the metro, the roads, and
Mm-hmm.
after you build up the rest. In the West, it's the opposite. We build up things without planification. When I say planification, we are talking about 20 years planification.
Mm-hmm.
So we build up the city, and then we say, oh, we are going to build up the metro. It
Mm.
sense. It's much more expensive. So this is why in China, and actually they blame China for that, because they call them the ghost city, because they start building up, and there's a lag time between the time you build up the roads infrastructure and people start to moving in, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes prosperous. And I actually experienced this in China, because I've been in China for 25 years. Of course, I mean, you see those huge projects, and you ask yourself, oh, I mean, are people going to live in? And yes, it's just this whole planification which makes so much sense. While in the West, we don't have that. We don't have planification. And again, infrastructure, it's the foundation for growth and prosperity. If you and this is why continents like Africa, they I mean, they are craving for that.
Yeah.
Imagine, I mean, there's a big part of Africa that doesn't have access to electricity.
Yep.
How you can build up a prosperous society without electricity? I mean, this is basic
Can't.
human rights.
Yeah, and China's building a dam in Ethiopia, and there's a theory which is probably going to be validated once these documents get declassified, that the U.S. is pushing the Tigray separatists in order to stop that dam.
Exactly. It is very interesting now. If you analyze the conflicts we have around the world, you need to look at which side is the country. I mean, every single country that is actually siding with the Belt and Road Initiative are being targeted, and there are many, many examples. The latest example is Myanmar.
Mm.
Myanmar.
What's going on right now? Can you was there a sanction or something or?
I think it's important to look into the context of Myanmar.
Okay.
The democracy has been hijacked. It's been 20 years because USA, the National Endowment for Democracy, they've poured millions and millions of dollars into meddling into the democracy of Myanmar, and they heavily finance the NLD, which is the party of Aung San Suu Kyi.
National
League.
Democratic League or something,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, what they did is that they wanted to install a client regime
Mm-hmm.
controlled by Aung San Suu Kyi, which was, she was educated in the West. She got the Nobel Peace Prize, and you know what it means. When it's part of a plan. It's building up this image of a nice person. Like that is going to represent the West. And actually, what she does, in Myanmar, what she did was clearly, she was surrounded by Western consultants, and if you look at the background of those consultants, we are talking about people that come from the George Soros Foundation,
Ah.
US aid, and basically she's just a puppet. She's just taking orders from Western consultants that just they were just a few years ago working for the U.S. State Department. So what happened in Myanmar is that the military took over because of that, because they need to regain their sovereignty. I'm not pro military, but when it comes to Myanmar, it's really important that to understand that democracy, there's no democracy, there's no sovereignty. Because democracy is a process of self-determination. So in
Ah.
the case of Myanmar, Myanmar, before having a democracy, it needs to gain its sovereignty. So what happens is that the military in the last 10, 15 years, they've been pushing for projects in the Belt and Road Initiative. And actually, because they are so strategic for national sovereignty and national security, this was a task that was taken by the military. But what Aung San Suu Kyi did in the last 10 years, because she's a US puppet, she did everything just to stop those projects of the Belt and Road Initiative. I
Wow.
can give you some examples. She stopped a huge dam project with China. She actually they downsized the project of a deep sea port. There are many different examples about how she did everything she could just to slow down or stop those projects. And ultimately, when you look at the position of Myanmar, Myanmar does 30% of its trade exports to China. It doesn't make any sense to cut ties with China.
Of
So
course not. And it's right next door to China, too.
exactly. So what happened with the U.S., especially in the region, with keeping in mind that there's a strategy of encirclement of China. It's encirclement through various, either through countries or through uh, uh, putting chaos into sensitive regions like Xinjiang and Tibet. So if they cannot put a puppet regime around China in Thailand or Myanmar, what they do is they just create chaos. Chaos and anarchy. I'll give you another example in Malaysia. In Malaysia, they did exactly the same. A few years back, they had financed the opposition for 20 years. And the first thing that the opposition did when they got into power was to stop some Belt and Road Initiative project.
Wow.
So when you look at the regime change agenda of the US around the world, it's there are proxy wars, US, China. It's very simple, and it's and Venezuela is the same. Venezuela is actually is going all the way just to it's partnering with China because it doesn't have any choice. I mean, it's just it's like the enemy of my enemy becomes my friend, and so this is why you have lots of countries that are actually tilting towards China because China is giving the solution of helping through transfer of technology, know-how, helping to building up infrastructure, and very important, those countries they need to loans. And what happened with China? China gives loans that are not there's no string attached to the loans.
So they
While
don't
when
like privatize everything or whatever.
no, you don't have to liberalize your market. You don't need to sell state-owned enterprises. You don't need to privatize water. Those all those absurd things. I mean, when you are talking about selling state-owned assets, I mean, we're talking about national sovereignty. Why should you meddle? Well, why? And again, those the loans that the West is giving to the global South are shark loans. The interest rates are extremely high. China is giving an option, much better options, and very often it's a win-win.
Oh yeah. By the way,
Yeah,
today I got this book. I just got this book from Dr. Nyango Samba Siala. It's called Africa's Last Colonial Currency. So some countries in Africa don't even have sovereignty over their currency, but you're right. On top of it, they also other countries like have big IMF packages and lots of
yeah,
privatization of resources, mines, whatever.
yeah. Actually, it's a very good point. You mentioned. I think there are around 14 countries. I need to double check, but
Here,
14.
I have the book with me right now. There are, yes, 14, exactly 14 countries.
Yes, they are using the franc CFA. And actually, when you look at the globalist agenda, they well, what was imperialism a long time ago, it was having soldiers on the ground. That was the old imperialism. Now imperialism comes in a different form, and the most subtle form, I mean, which is I mean, just amazing when you look at the transition, is through the currency. So it's either you control the currency, or like in the case of the French government, which is actually printing 14 countries' currency in Africa,
Yeah.
or actually you impose the dollar. So the dollarization. This is the ultimate fight. The ultimate.
They did that to Ecuador.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they impose the dollar in many places. Or but what happens is that because it's the international currency. I mean, especially uh, it's tied to the dollar. If you want to the, not to the dollar, to the oil. If you want to buy oil, I mean, by definition, you need to have dollars. Because all the transactions are made in dollars. So you need to look at what the transition. How did we come up to having this currency? And we need to go back to World War II. Uh, After World War II, the U.S. was the superpower.
Yeah.
They had 35% of world GDP, and they imposed on the world a currency, the US dollar, which was backed by gold. So basically, there was you could go to the Federal Reserve with dollars, and they would exchange those dollars against gold. This was feasible back then because the USA had a trade surplus, meaning that they were selling more than they were buying. But later on, until the 1970s, and this is especially because of the Vietnam War, the US started to have a deficit. So what happens that you had countries like France and de Gaulle, he had this excess of US dollar currency, and he actually would send ships full of dollars, and he would just push to have those dollars to be given, to be given like gold. And this became like very difficult because actually, they were emptying the reserve of gold in the US. So what Nixon did was that he said, well, from now on, we are going to stop this. So it's the US dollar is not going to be backed by gold anymore. So meaning this, it goes from being a currency, being money, to becoming a currency. There's a difference, and this is what we call like fiat currency. Fiat currency is, there's no intrinsic value, there's no tangible value behind this. It's just paper. And the currency is what it is. It's linked to how much people have trust in that currency. So by having a currency which is the international currency, the US dollar can actually print whatever it needs without creating hyperinflation. If you are not a national international currency like the US dollar, let's say you are uh, the ruble, Russian ruble. If you start printing too much money, then you have hyperinflation. In the case of the US, you don't have that. So this is very powerful, and this is how actually the imperial project is working. Is by imposing the currency. And so when you look at what the Belt and Road Initiative and what China is doing, is actually a decoupling from the US dollar. I think I lost you,
No, no, no,
Ezra.
I'm here. I'm here. I just the camera went off, so I have to use my phone as a backup. But
Yeah,
what I'm saying is that it's decoupling. Yeah. So basically, China has a lot of extra dollar reserves, so it's
exactly.
dumping it. Like so, then they give the loan, and then they return the dollar back.
No, no, no. It's very important to understand this process. I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible. We're not going to be too technical. So let's say China has a trade surplus, and let's say they are dealing with the US only in US dollar. So when you are selling more to the US than buying from the US, you end up with much more dollars. China has dollars, US dollars, and those are investing to US bonds, while the US has a debt. And what happens is that this debt is increasing, and is not for the US. In the mind of whoever is ruling the US, it's not going to be repaid. They can't repay unless trade changes. That the US starts selling more to China, and we reverse
But
this.
there's no way for the US to sell more to China because China has the industry and US only has, I don't know, whatever is left after they ship the factories abroad, right?
Well, yeah, well, it's competitiveness. It's just the US is not competitive. It's a and how do you get competitiveness is when you invest into infrastructure, you invest into education, into people, and so on.
And they're not
In
going to do
China,
that.
in China, you have that. In
But in
China,
America, you won't.
no, well, China, in the US, you have constantly transfer of wealth, and it's about giving more power to the elites, and so you have this gap, and it's a strategy of keeping people on a survival mode to have the minimum, and just trying to. And when people are on a survival mode, they're not going to make a revolution. They don't have time. They don't even have time to be politicized. They're just suffering. So just going back to that, so what China is doing, they're not participating in this Ponzi scheme. The system of the US dollar works as long as people keep on reinvesting into US bonds. US bonds is basically the debt of the US. So once they stop doing that, the Ponzi scheme stops. It stops. So China, what it is doing is actually, it's with one stone, it's killing many birds, because this excess US dollar is reinvested into the Belt and Road Initiative, into tangible assets. So this is helping China, helping its trade with its neighbors. It's good for security. I mean, when you have more trade with your neighbors, there's more peace. It's a good way to recycle US dollar into tangible assets, because otherwise it would be just paper, toilet paper currency. So you see that, and basically this is helping China to shift the economic, the world economic gravity towards Eurasia and the global South. And
Ah,
of course, I mean, you see that this whole thing, and additional to that, you have many countries that are starting to de-dollarize. Some of them intentionally, and some of them have no choice. You have Iran that is actually doing a lot of trade with China and other countries, not in US dollar. There's an agreement between Iran and China. It's a 25 years agreement that China is going to provide infrastructure to Iran.
ah,
And we are talking about 400 billion US dollar
wow.
for 25 years. And this is going to be an exchange of infrastructure and lending against oil. And this is
Ah,
a win-win. It's a win-win.
and
You
the
know,
thing is that just earlier this week, we saw that the US tried to pirate one of Iran's oil tankers. So with China, they're just gonna have some sort of way to transfer it inland, right? So they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
yes, what they are going to do, there's going to be a corridor, economic talk corridor as well, and they're trying, Belt and Road Initiative. Also, this is a very important point, is that for China, it's a good way to bypass maritime roads. So basically, they are going to build up pipelines, and because the biggest danger for China, besides the fact that they might go to war uh, with related to Taiwan. This is a sensitive topic, but also, if the U.S. wanted to hit really badly China, and it could basically squeeze Chinese economy, is through doing a blockade of the Strait of Malacca
That's near Indonesia.
near Indonesia, near Malaysia, and basically you need to remember World War II. How did how the World War II started for the US was because it did a blockade of
Of Japanese
oil.
tank, yes.
Exactly, they were stopping. So because the oil could not go to Japan, Japan had no way but to attack the US. So in reality, it was not Japan declaring war on the US. It was the opposite. When you are doing a blockade, this
Yeah.
is an act of war. So they are trying to do the same when it comes to China.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's a very interesting paper is from the RAND Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important think tank. There's actually saying that for the US, there is a window of opportunity where they can hit China between the period of 2015 to 2025. Because after that, it will be much more difficult to come against.
Ah, so they're going to be amping up all the color revolutions and everything for the next 2 or 3 years.
There this is part of it. There are many ways. Color revolution is one of them. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's a disruptions around the Belt and Road Initiative, encircling China. We are talking about, hitting on countries like Malaysia, trying to destabilize
Thailand.
Malaysia, Thailand. They tried in Vietnam, and Myanmar. You see the result in
Mm-hmm.
Myanmar. It succeeded. Civil war, for the standard of the U.S. State Department, what is happening in Myanmar is fine. The country's in chaos. You
Yeah.
know, and if there are refugees, Burmese refugees that cross to China, it's going to give a problem for China. And in
Mm-hmm.
the past, China had this.
Mm-hmm.
There are hundreds of thousands of Burmese, native Burmese in China still now because of the previous civil wars that Burma had. I mean, Burma has been in civil war for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
It has never really stopped, and it's really important. I think you had something with the Brian Beletic is an
Yeah,
excellent,
I did.
and probably he told you, how I mean, how those countries, when being decolonized, they never really decolonized because the imperial powers, they put the seeds for disruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as they did in Hong Kong. Before the handover in '97, they
Mm-hmm.
had planted already the seeds for this disruption into Hong Kong. So
How
we
did
are
they do
talking about,
that?
well, MI6 never left,
Ah,
never
I did
left.
not know that.
And they started funding, funding the opposition parties well before '97.
Oh,
These are long-term plans. Well, the same as, if you think about India, I don't think that India is independent. It
no,
never.
no. Ever since like before okay, before the Soviet Union fell, there had been like zero times that the BJP had ever had a seat. But then, like after they did the big IMF thingy in '92 and everything collapsed, all these like Silicon Valley people are like funding BJP. Like God knows how much they're giving all these like they're NGOs that are like that look normal to you, but they're totally like Hindutva crazy. Yeah, like on the side, like you can't tell if you look at them, but they are totally like Hindutva psychos over there, and that's how they ended up getting in power in '99.
Yes, but I think one of the biggest problems that we have, I mean, I'm talking about the people that are trying to debunk. I mean, to really to expose this meddling is really difficult because now those entities are called National Endowment for Democracy.
Mm.
A very noble word. I mean, people, they think, well, okay, well, this is an NGO that is working for democracy. It's a good thing. Why not? But in reality, what National Endowment for Democracy is doing is what the CIA was doing covertly.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're doing this openly, and the funding comes in many different forms, and it is only the tip of the iceberg. There's the George Soros Foundation, there's US aid. Now you have corporation too. I mean, now they are the big corporations that are coming into the game. So when you look at Western government, and let's say US government is ruled by the corporation. So they're giving the task to do regime change in those countries because they have such plans in those countries. Now what you have is the corporation meddling more and more, and now it's not anymore just the US. You have also European countries that are actually they have created the equivalence of the National Endowment for Democracy. You have the Germans, uh,
Poland even they're
you
like
know
dumping a lot of money for the Belarus stuff.
Polish Stiftung. You have many different ways, and even the green. I think I mentioned this to you. I mean, the green in Germany, they are the most pro NATO, and you need to be very careful of those fake left, especially when it comes to Europe. Those fake left that are actually pro NATO and pro war.
Yes.
It's there are many examples where actually it was very subtle. They tapped into the left, so they could really divide the left and actually change the direction of the left should be. There are many examples. I like to use the example of France. In May 1968, there was a coup against a coup that was led by Maoists in France, and and he was against the goal, which was more on the right. But when I say right, it's more in terms of values. And they overthrew the government, and they were financed by the CIA.
Oh
And
wow.
those guys, they were Trotskyists and they were Maoists. And now, if you see those guys, they've been recycled, into what? Glucksmann is a regime change agent. Basically, he's been working for Saakashvili. That's an
Oh,
example.
he's the guy who started in Georgia and then became like a governor of a state in
Yeah.
Ukraine. It's so
Well,
weird.
his father was a Maoist. He was a Maoist.
Ah, I did
He
not know
was
that.
behind the May '68 revolution. You have Cohn-Bendit. Cohn-Bendit is actually he admitted pedophile, and who was a Maoist back then. He's actually is really pro imperialist. And you have many, you have Kushner, Bernard Kushner. You have many
Oh
of
yeah.
those ones. They were all leftists because they were financed by the CIA back then. So you need to be really careful. So now there are not many parties, leftist parties that in Europe that are respectable. I'd rather be, in some cases, I would rather vote for some right parties in Europe because they are more for sovereignty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, when I tell you my position when it comes to politics, ideology, uh, number one is anti-imperialism and sovereignty. So I
Yeah.
will not respect a leftist that is actually pro-imperialist. I mean, this is
You
the
can't
joke.
be left and be pro-imperialist because
No,
you have to realize what the U.S. is going to do. It'll privatize everything, shock doctrine, austerity, misery, and yeah, like and the thing is that in Western Europe, at least, a lot of actually a lot of these like leftist parties ended up like turning completely neoliberal.
no, no, absolutely. I have no respect. I mean, Ensha, really, I have absolutely no respect for those leftists that don't understand this, really. I mean, the thing is that it's first about sovereignty. Because, well, you don't have sovereignty, you have no democracy. That's basic. This is politics 101. And then it's like, why would you oppress the global south?
So that
Why
you
would
can have
you, you know, you,
steal
you
resources.
I mean, this is, imperialist project is also a very racist project.
Yeah, it is.
Racist, it's like those anti-racist movement, BLM, that are actually pro-imperialist. It doesn't make any sense because you know what? You are black and you are for BLM, but actually ultimately you are voting for a party that is imperialist that is actually killing your brothers in Africa and in Asia. The thing is that we need to be first anti-imperialist. That's
Yes.
that's the foundation. And after, okay, well, you know what? I'm actually flexible when it comes to ideology, but left, right, we can debate about this. And I have respect for everything when it comes to ideology. Are you pro-choice or not? I mean, this is details. The big fight is anti-imperialism. That's the big fight, and that's my fight. The rest, you know what, left, right, but by definition, if you are anti-imperialist, you are socialist. Then you are a real socialist by definition.
I
Not
mean,
the opposite. Not the opposite.
you're absolutely right. Because there are thousands of parties in Europe that call themselves socialist, but ultimately they just are not ending the exploitation at all. They're just trickling down a little bit more profits than the U.S. elites would.
Now, well, they throw you a bone once in a while,
Exactly.
but they are, you need to follow the money. I mean, who's behind them, and you need to look at facts, not the good words, and look at the bills, build back better and so on. I mean, you really, it's every time you have those trillions dollars that are, that are funding project, it's there's a transfer of wealth, and when the US is printing money, what it is doing actually, this is hidden tax on the poors. You print money, people think that, oh, they're helping us and so on. No, no, no. Keep in mind that the dollar that you were making last year, you this year you can buy less thing. This is hidden tax, you know. And in reality, people need to look at, how do I live? Do I live better now? Can I put more food on the table? Can I put my kids to school? That's the foundation. That's the foundation. It's there.
Yeah. And like I said, there's two things I've noticed. Like there's like what you call like a propaganda blitz where it doesn't matter what the truth is. If they say something like Ethiopia coup 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 coup, it'll like people will believe it happened whether or not it actually happened. So there's that we're fighting against, and the second is just the plain old Americans are not realizing how what exactly the U.S. does abroad.
Yeah, but look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia in Africa is booming. It's
Yeah,
exploding. This project of dam is going to bring so much to Ethiopia. We're not,
because it's going to electrify the whole country.
exactly electrify. It's linked. It's a very strategic
Yeah,
place where.
so then now they can grow more food because they can use so much more machinery that they would have had couldn't use. And if they can grow more food, you'll never have a famine again in Ethiopia.
Yeah. So now you have all those talks about global, climate change, and that is so hypocritical, because so many countries that you cannot do the big jump to having no electricity to have solar panels. There's a process, and you are asking those countries that actually never did much impact I mean, per capita in terms of CO2 emissions, they need to do they need to do this transition slowly. So this is why this is probably a project of the COP26, which is tied to to the same as what the IMF and the World Bank was doing, just meddling and
Ah,
making sure that those countries are going gradually to lose more and more sovereignty.
ah,
So it's those are entities for better controlling the world. So it's not a coincidence that you have countries like China, Russia, Turkey that didn't want to attend because they know this is a joke. And this is not the first time. They're trying by many different ways. COP26 is one example. Next month in December, you are going to have the democracy summit. You
oh
know,
yeah. They what is that by the way?
Well, it's another marketing thing just to put more pressure, and it's also it's a strategy to more polarize the world. Oh, because of course the democracy summit, China will not be invited, Russia the same. So it's about how we can further demonize China and Russia, and and,
Ah,
and why in reality it's very simple. When you go to China, you analyze the political system. It's a government by the people, for the people, of the people. If you go to the Congress and you look at who is at the Congress, you have the average Joe that is at the Congress, really. Well, of course, there's selections for entering, but it's very representative of the people. When you look at the Congress, they are all multimillionaire. I mean, you have Biden, he's worth 70 million US dollar. Pelosi,
wow,
she's worth 300
100 million
million
or more.
dollars.
Exactly.
Obama and Clinton, they are around 60, 70 million. Mitt Romney is 200 million US dollar. So I'm asking, is this off by for the people? No,
No.
it's not. It's not. When you go to China and you look at the Congress, it's extremely representative of the people. And plus it's a system of selection and election, and you have a meritocracy system. So you go up to the ladder of power if you deliver, because it's a meritocracy system, and it has been delivering. The last 40 years, you have 700 millions of Chinese that came out of extreme poverty.
Yep.
I mean, this is delivering.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not like the Western system of
Uh-uh.
democracy of beauty contest.
Nope.
I'm going to tell you what you want me to say.
Yeah.
If I keep my word or not doesn't matter. And it's a system of electing regret.
Yes, elect and
You
regret.
know, people, so many people, they elected Biden because they didn't like Trump.
Trump.
And half of them are going to regret, are already regretting. And it's the same vicious circle of elect and regret. And people don't learn because they don't realize that those people, what matters for those people is they are following the orders of whoever pays
Mm-hmm.
for the election,
Yep.
not for whoever votes, because who pays already decide the politics.
Yeah.
So you see, it's a they want to export a model which is for the 1% by the 1% of the 1%. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what the alternative. And I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying that Putin is perfect, Xi Jinping is perfect, but they're working for the people.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
And they are giving another alternative.
Yes.
There's a study, Howard study, about China, and Howard is not doesn't have a reputation to be pro-Chinese, but they
Mm-hmm.
did a study on a level of satisfaction of the people
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the CPC in China, and you have 95% of people that support the CPC. So legitimacy is very counterintuitive. People think that one vote, one person, one vote, and universal suffrage is legitimacy of democracy.
It's
It
never
is not.
enough. You have
No,
to have more them
it's,
like representing the will of the people, right?
well, you have preconditions. If you want that, you have preconditions. Preconditions are very simple. There's no money meddling into
Mm-hmm.
politics. There's no lobbying, because lobbying in reality is corruption.
Mm-hmm.
What we call lobbying in the US, it's called corruption in China, and you go to jail for that.
Exactly.
Then you have media. You need to have neutral media. You need to have people need to have a certain level of education to have a democracy.
Yep.
You need
And
a,
that doesn't even happen in the U.S. That never happens in the U.S. because there's no universal education.
no well, and then keep in mind that very often you need to look at the rule of the game. When the foundation of the rule of the game is from the Constitution, and the Constitution is written to protect the minorities against the people against the elites.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that most Western democracies,
Do the
the
opposite.
they did the opposite. They gave the Constitution that were written by the elites, and this is what is happening in the West.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, literally in the US, James Madison said the purpose of the government is to protect those with property from those without. And that was he wrote the Constitution.
yeah, yeah, but it's all those. After what happens that Hollywood and media they tell you another story, but I like to go back to all the history of the like the first among the first democracies, modern democracy. And the French democracy is a good example. When you had, it was a fight between the monarchy and the elites. And so what happens that the people that came out in the street that overthrew the king was because of bread, was not because of wanting democracy. And they were used by the elites, by the bourgeoisie, and they ended up not having the right to vote because after the French Revolution, only people that were paying taxes were had the right to vote. The poor people never got the right to vote, and up to now, still now, if you look at French politics, it's a weak democracy.
Oh yeah,
There are not many Western democracies that I really would call democracies, and,
well
and
in France, like if you are a candidate, you need to get like approval from like 70 mayors or something like 70
500 maybe.
500 now?
You need 500 signatures to be in the race for being a president in France.
Yeah, and those are from like mayors, people who are like already the elite.
Yeah, well, keep in mind that There are, when it comes to France, there are 9 families that control probably 80 to 90% of the media in France.
Ah,
And,
I did not know
and
that.
Macron actually was nobody. He had been, Minister of Finance,
And he
but
was
basically,
Goldman
they
Sachs or
put him
some.
out there. He was before he even declared himself to be in the race for being president. Out there, like every single day, you had like in all the media, he was all the way there. So they
Mm.
decided that he was going to be the next president. And like, and very often, like those potential candidates, they very often, just by chance, one year or 2 years before going to the race, they just happen to be invited into the Bilderberg group, into the meeting. So you
Ah.
see, you see this whole process, how it works. So it's just really important that, I mean, people should learn much more what it means to have democracy. And people don't know the even basic differences between voting and electing. In reality, it's very counterintuitive. You think that you are electing, but actually, and actually, you're exercising your democratic right. It's not.
No.
Let me explain you why. Because the real democratic right is actually voting. When you're voting, you're deciding for a law, and you really have an impact. When you're electing someone, you are electing your master, and you're giving up your rights,
Do you?
democratic.
Oh, yeah. To them, for them to represent you.
Exactly, for 4 or 5 years. So this is why, it's one of the good, alternative to or indirect democracies is to put some direct democracy, and this is what we have in Venezuela. In Venezuela, you can have a referendum, meaning you got a certain amount of signatures.
Uh huh.
If you if you don't keep your promise, you promised us that you are going to do this law and this law. Well, I'm going to gather some signatures, and we are going to vote. The whole people, we are going to vote, and we can overthrow the government. So, I think, I mean, the Western democracies are still a utopia, but there are ways to change that. And the ways to change that, is to have those preconditions, and also to change a little bit, at least to have some levels of direct democracy. And direct democracy, you have it in some countries. Switzerland is a very good example. I grew up in Switzerland, and this is a very good example. But again, Switzerland is very mature. We're talking about maturity of people too. It's not the beauty contest. When you look at, I mean, how popular. I mean, you have two choices like Biden and Trump. I mean, you know, Biden or Trump, if they were in China, they wouldn't make you village leader.
No, they would not have.
They would not. They would not. You know. Uh, I want to add something because there are a lot of people criticize China as being a one-party system. Well, there are 90 million members of the in the CPC in
Wow.
China.
That's a lot of people.
That's probably 7-8% of the population. But when you analyze all societies, and if you really analyze, well, let's say in the US, the people that are really politicized, I'm talking about hardcore, politicized, responsible, and so on. It's a range between 5 to 10%, because most of people they don't care about politics. Politics for most people, it's something you talk over coffee and you just complain, but you're not involved into politics. So China, what it is doing through the CPC is that it's taking people that are actually uh, are politicized. They are interested to contribute. In addition to that, there's a selection system. So you need a certain level of maturity and to understand politics, and then you enter into the system, and then you contribute to society. And if you are willing to go ahead, well, you go ahead. You go up the ladder of power by delivering
To your
and
people.
to your people. It's a
Yeah.
system of meritocracy. So you see, China in many ways is far more democratic than the US.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. I
You
mean,
know, it's just a little bit counterintuitive. The fact that people have the right to vote, and but the ultimate choice is two clowns, Biden and Trump. This is not democracy. and they are financed by the same people, so it doesn't
Yeah.
change.
And
It's
they
just
represent the
people.
interests of the same people too.
Exactly, exactly. So you see, I mean, this is what bothers me a lot. I mean, it's just that people don't have the foundation,
No.
and of course, and I think this is well, the foundation. It comes with experience. I mean, when I was 20, to be honest, well, I grew up in a family, hardcore communist. My father was a worker. He was a communist, and it was really hard. In the 70s, 60s, and 70s, to be communist in Europe, it was really difficult. There was some oppression.
Persecuted, fired.
Persecution, exactly. So I was in a family politicized. So I managed somehow to get a certain level of political awareness because of my family. But the average kid, look at what kids are looking at. I mean, you are 18 years old, you have the right to vote. Actually, it's just ridiculous. I mean, in the US, you have to wait 21 before drinking, but then you have the right to vote at 18. It's just
But then,
ridiculous.
like, because voting is utterly meaningless because they know they have, like, for example, with I met AOC before she was nobody when she had like, I don't know, 10 Twitter followers or whatever, and she had the best of intentions. But the thing is that she was not um, strong-willed. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
well, I don't know. I like to be flexible. They're a little bit flexible, saying, well, somehow people get hostages. They become hostages. But
yeah, she's not strong-willed to stand up to power. So even just like they don't even have to do much. Because she's like so used to like she gets easily persuaded. Like so she met like she should know better, but she met with Bolivian fascists. It's like, oh, you should have like looked at their Facebook page. So she's
yeah,
very easily persuaded, and she doesn't have a strong enough will. And so even if she has the best of intentions when she comes in, she's not going to be able to do anything useful.
well, you know what? The thing is that AOC, she betrayed her people. You see, to be honest, and I know some people are not going to like what I'm going to say, but I will respect much more a Republican, a redneck Republican that is actually honest with his word and his beliefs, but he's not betraying me, than AOC that sold me something and she's completely the opposite and betrayed our people. I don't respect her. I'm sorry, I don't respect that because she betrayed her people. The guy was Republican and I don't share his values. Well, okay. Because keep in mind that what she's voting for, she's fighting for, is once in a while she's throwing you a bone. But when it was important, when it was important, those this opposition, they could have, especially now, the gang of how many are there, 4 or 5, they could have made the change. They could have blackmailed a little bit, the establishment and say, well, it's what the Jimmy Dore did. He was calling for force the vote. You promised something, you didn't deliver. And it's not about throwing a bone here and there. This is like just cosmetic. It's not there. Because after all, look at what they're voting for. They're just following. And again, Republican or Democrats is all the same. It's
Yep,
just a little bit of cosmetic. you know
exactly. So what I was saying is okay. By the way, I just want to address. I was not doing AOC apologetics. I was just trying to explain how it's not even sinister and like it just happens because you're in Washington, and
yeah,
that's the like it's about the advisors, and so Congress
yeah.
people don't read their bills. Like there's a thousand things, but
Yeah. Let me give you another example. Actually, when there's a good example of being hostages. Dalai Lama is the same.
oh
You
god,
see, Dalai Lama. What do you know? I mean, you need to understand. It was a theocracy. It was the worst regime. I mean, Saudi Arabia compared
yeah,
to
they
the
would cut off people's arms for robbing and things like that.
yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia would look like a Disneyland compared to
Yeah.
Tibet or the Dalai Lama. But you see, he took money from the CIA in the 50s. But what happens is that even if he wanted, he could not, he was a hostage once you take that money. So you see, I make the parallel between the Dalai Lama and AOC, it's the same. You enter into the system, and if you give up just a little bit, that's it, you know.
Yeah.
And if you are really true to your convictions, you don't do long term, you know. I mean,
Mm-mm.
there's only what Tulsi Gabbard, you know, she had the guts to do something, you know. There's Massey, maybe there's a
Dennis
few of them.
Kucinich, they just erased his district in 2010 because he stood up to Obama.
Yeah, well, you see, I mean, can you call a country a democracy when they are silencing a president who is in function?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm not a pro-Trump, you know. I'm not a Trump
Mm-hmm.
apologist, but that's a foundation, you know. How and why would you want to export this system to other countries? Why? I mean, you know, I mean, other countries they know what is happening in the U.S. They know it's
Yeah.
they know it's a divide and conquest system. Why would I want that? Why would I want? It's all about lying, you know. How many lies?
Yes.
They're just lying. They tell you something before being elected. You know, Obama he promised to close Guantanamo. What did he
In the
do? I
first
mean,
100 days.
yeah, you know, yeah, how many lies? The only thing is that you see the Democrats, what they're doing is that they're dropping bombs. But you know, who's in the CIA now is just transgender. You know, it's more. You know, it's like it's this new generation. But at the end, you know what? It's not going to change. There are still bombs. It's not because people you are into this identity politics and you have more balanced black, you know, African, you know, whatever. It's the same. It's just cosmetic. It's just, you know, the better marketing just to look cool, you know. But at the end of the day, it's inhumane. It's criminal. You know, it's not no different than what Nazi Germany was doing in World War II. It's
Oh,
no different.
no, no, it's identical. As in, if you like read my article about the Jakarta method, basically the U.S. is an extraction thing where they just want to make people poor and extract their resources. And in order to fight democracy, they just have to. The only method they have is just killing everything that moves.
Yeah, remember, I mean, you know, the U.S. has the good role. I mean, when you are into power, you know, especially since the World War II, you know, they won World War II and they got to write history. And this is very critical, you know, when you got to write history, it's, you know, and you got to manipulate everything that comes after, you know, and especially through Hollywood, you know. Keep in mind that most of people, they learn history not at school, they learn history through Hollywood, you know.
And yeah,
People, you know, and so I read once an historian that said, you know, World War II, they were all butchers. The only difference is that you have a butcher that is more skillful, and he wins because he's just more skillful, but he's still a butcher. You see, and then the one that wins got to write history. But you see, I think it's really important. It's not binary. There's a gray area, you know, and I think what we need to fight, especially those days, it's we need to fight against war. You
oh
know,
yeah,
because this is what is going to, you know, I think the problem, especially in the US, is that people they don't have any connection with war. You
no,
know,
no, no, they don't. They don't actually have because it's been decades since like they've had anything devastated. They haven't. And they don't even realize what they're doing. Like a lot of people are in Afghanistan committing the worst atrocities, and they don't even uh, realize like what their government is doing. Like even though it's in front of their eyes.
yeah, well, you know, the only time they were attacked, and you know, I'm not going to go into conspiracy for 9/11, but you know, they were attacked, you know, like 20 years ago. You know, 3,000 people died. Uh, because of that, they went to war against terror. I mean, terror, whoever, you know, and at the end, we never. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, they were all
there are more
innocent.
terrorists now than there ever were.
You know, well, the problem is that, you know, in the US, is there any intelligent people that
No.
actually ask themselves, after 9/11, they ask themselves, why did we get this on the first place?
Yeah,
Why
no,
did
they're
we
not.
get this in the first place? Saying, wait, you know what? You had terrorism on your soil. Why don't you ask yourself, did I do something bad in the Middle East? Is it related to, I mean, you know, what I did in, you know, Palestine, you know, like all the, I mean, all everything that I've done in the Middle East. I mean, you know, we talk about, I mean, it's terrible, you know. It's not only the Middle East, no, it's the global south. Some war are hot, some war are lukewarm, it's over time, but it's destroying generations. Africa, it's you're not giving future to those people. In Venezuela, I'm here in Venezuela, they're suffering like heavy sanctions. You know how long average people have to wait for gasoline?
No.
12 hours.
Wow.
12 hours. What they do is that in the morning they park the car online, and you have miles of lines, and they come back 10 hours later, and then the gas station is open, and then we go. It's suffering. Economy has dropped by 80%. 80%. I used to live in Venezuela. I'm coming back here every single day. I'm depressed. And this
Wow.
is war. People should have access. They should come to Venezuela, and they should see how people are suffering, and they would realize, well, you know what? This Venezuela is at war, and it's because of sanctions. Sanction kill. 40,000 kids died because of the sanctions on Venezuela.
Oh, wow.
I mean, medication. Simple stuff. They did everything. And plus, I mean, we're talking about assets, billions of dollars being blocked. In banks everywhere. In London, in New York, that belongs to the people of Venezuela that are starving. I mean, gladly, it's a socialist country, and they're taking care of their people. It's
As
much.
best as they could, under what they have
Yes,
resources.
no, but you know what? Venezuela has the largest oil reserve in the world, and they don't have enough gasoline. How
Oh, wow.
ridiculous is that? And you know
Yeah.
what they're doing? You mentioned a tanker, being seized, the Iraqi Iran tanker. They're doing that. The U.S. has actually seized some tankers from Iran that were supposed to go to Venezuela, and they took the whole loads. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. This is pirates. I mean, this is gangster. This is mafia.
Oh, yeah.
And you're stealing gasoline. You're stealing oil
Yeah.
for uh, uh, we had power cuts. Imagine, this. I'm going to tell you a story what happened to me. I was at the dentist. Halfway, we had a power cut. Imagine that. I
Wow.
was not finished. We had a power cut. So this is first hand, sanctions. It's inhumane, and you have many, many different cases. So, somehow Venezuela is surviving. Cuba, after 50 years of sanctions, is still doing okay. Well, the risk, what the U.S. doesn't want, is that you have a socialist system close to the U.S. that is actually delivering to its people, and that is the biggest risk. And so China is also a risk. Imagine if China keeps on growing, keeps on delivering to its
Well,
people.
with Cuba, they said that it was a threat of a good example.
No, exactly. I didn't know how to say, but I think it's the good
No,
news
no,
of.
that was literally the word from the State Department when they said why they had to overthrow Cuba in 1961 was Cuba's a threat of a good example.
Well, remember, I mean, the country, U.S. is a country that actually, it's always saying, well, we want democracy and so on. But a long time ago, you had communists in the U.S., and look at what they did to the communists in the
They killed
U.S.
them, a lot of them.
They killed them, or they destroyed their careers. Like how
Yeah,
many people there were in the movie industry?
thousands, and thousands were like purged, killed, shot, sent to jail. Like, yeah,
Actually, now, still now in the subconscious mind in the U.S., people see communists as the equivalents of Nazis. This is how much propaganda has worked well.
yeah, yeah. No, no, no. It's worse than that because, oh my God, yeah, the U.S. has like so much Nazi apologia. It's whoa, whoa.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look at the pre World War II. You know that the U.S. actually was much more pro Hitler before World War
Oh
II,
yeah,
than
absolutely.
than and because the enemy was the communist. So you had huge Nazi conventions in the U.S. And what happens that the U.S. was very very opportunistic. They actually supplied a lot of technology. Especially with IG Farben in Germany. This whole technology of kerosene. I mean what fly, the liquid that you need to fly planes. This whole technology was transferred to Germany.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, that's the synthetic thingy, synthetic
Exactly.
oil.
Actually, you had also synthetic oil actually that came from coal actually too. I mean, this whole technology was transferred to IG Farben. And remember, Ford was actually very close to
Hitler.
yeah, factories in Germany was very close to the Nazi regime and so on. So what happens that they started pushing a lot. I mean, the Germans, because the 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 risk back then for the US was communist. All along was communist.
Well, for the
So
elites.
for the elites. So they sided for Hitler, and then when Hitler was going to win against the USSR, they started funding massively and sending a lot of weapons to the USSR. And this is,
Oh, I mean, a little bit. Like, okay, but ultimately, even without the U.S. weapons, I still say like Americans often think that without the Lend Lease, the USSR would have lost. No, but also a lot of the Lend Lease Act was sent to like basically the way everything was that was under a Britain colony. They sent a lot of it to like they say India, but India didn't exist back then. I think when you look at the Lend, it's really funny.
yeah, yeah, but you see, I mean, you need to look at how the US came out of this.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then when they, well, in their half of Germany and their half of Korea, they put the Nazis and fascists back in power.
oh, exactly, exactly. I mean, and they recycle lots of Nazis. There was Gladio operation. Then they recycled the Nazi into the creation of the EU. A lot of
Exactly.
people they
And
don't
in
know, but
NATO,
yeah, well, the EU was a CIA creation.
Walter Hallerstein was a Nazi.
Yeah, he was one of the first to lead this project. And actually, Jean Monnet, they say Jean Monnet was the father of the EU, but there's plenty of evidence that he was a CIA agent. So he was on the payroll of the CIA. So you see, the EU was an operation to actually better control Europe, and the ultimate project is to destroy nation states. And if you look at the project, the globalist project, ultimately it's about destroying nation states. They don't want nation states. So you destroy nation states, but you need to destroy many things that are related to nation states. You need to have immigration to mix up races. You need to destroy family values. You need to destroy religion. It's a complex way just to globalize everything, and to give and to give the power to all the corporation. Ultimately, the world they want us to have is going to be a huge village controlled by the corporation.
Like feudalism again.
No, exactly. It's just I mean, just marketing. It's much more subtle. It's
Yeah.
subtle and it's gradual. You need to ask. People need to ask questions. And they are weaponization. They manage to weaponize everything, the climate, races, identity. There's a I don't know if you know Luna Oy.
Yeah,
She's
I
from
know Luna.
well, Luna. I talked to her, and she said, you know what? They weaponized LGTB in Vietnam.
Mm.
They finance a lot LGBT movements, and they put the candidate LGBT, and people would vote because he was LGBT. So
But
this
they were
is
actually like an NED. Got it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you see, and it's very sad. It's very sad. Some movements that are anti-racist and homophobic, and so on. Actually, they are actually the one creating the problem.
Sometimes, yeah.
It's You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because when you push in on the face, and it's about mutual respect. So you see, I am anti-racist, and I have good reason. I was immigrant, all my life, and I was picked on all the time. I was you know, uh, Italians living in Switzerland, we were a doctor, you were different, just small difference, but I was picked on. I know what is racist, and but so I'm very angry because you have racist people that are actually weaponizing
Yeah.
racism,
Well,
and
like,
ultimately, yeah, and it's like straight guys that are actually pushing for gender identity and so on. They're not. It's not people that are concerned. You have actually white guys hijacking fights that are not the fights. You see what I mean? It's just they're being used. You
Yes.
know,
Eh,
and Black Lives Matter, it was being used. Look
yes.
at the financing. It was George Soros.
No, no. Well, in Cuba, abroad, in Cuba, they actually tried to make some nonsense about it, and then like it got shut down. But yeah, it's like go. A lot of like the symbols and all this, you just kind of have to pay if you don't pay very close attention, you're not going to catch it.
Yeah, but the thing, you know what? I'm actually pro. I'm extremely tolerant. But what I hate the most is that people are using those great fights for other purposes.
Oh yeah,
That
all the
that, that
time.
that's what bothers me. And,
Yeah.
and what bothers me also is that a lot of leftists, they are just fight. They got the wrong fight. It's a social class fight. It's not about identity. Fuck. Why don't you fucking stop about those identity politics? It's tiring. It's
Because
stupid.
well, that's the thing. They want a fragmented society, but on top of that, unfortunately, a lot of Westerners just don't have the skills to understand what is going on in the world.
Esha, I'm going to give you an example. In the old days, the Black Panthers, and back then was the Boogaloo. A group of Proud Boys.
No, no, they were the red. They were the Patriot,
Rednecks.
Patriot
Yeah,
Party, the Virginia Patriot. Yeah, they were Marxist Leninist.
yeah, but it was very interesting because they joined together.
Yeah, but
And
they were
before,
already Marxist Leninist, and they were called the Virginia Patriot Party or something.
but the thing is that other people, on the media and so on, they would rather have them to fight each other on race
Yes.
issues. But what happens that those white guys, Marxists, they ended up being bodyguards of the Black Panthers. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was back, and you see, and they were taking pictures together. And it was a good example
Yep.
because when you look at when you look at the BLM and the Boogaloo, what they have in common. Okay, of course, Boogaloo, you have always chemistry. And I'm not expert in this, but what I'm saying is that if they were smart, they would fight for what unites them. What they have in common is that they are poor.
Yes.
They are intelligent is that they stop this BS about race and they fight the class struggle. And they
Exactly. But
So what the elite want is divide us through identity politics so we don't fight the real war, because the real war is fighting those elites because they are the big enemies, not only in the US but for
but
the
in the
world.
world. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Angelo, for joining us, and hopefully we'll can have you for like another week.
We went into lots of directions, but it was a pleasure. It was a
Okay, well,
pleasure.
thank you so much, and I will put your Twitter, and he's also on Inflections on the new Atlas with Brian Berlect. It's a once a week show, right?
Yeah, please follow New Atlas. Brian Beletic is amazing. He's
Yeah.
amazing. He's a great guy just to follow. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, and have a good rest of the evening, and thank you for joining us this late.
Thank you.
Um, And now we will have a pre recorded episode where we read about the rural poor with Comrade Trucker, Commie Trucker. And he has like such a nice, soothing, relaxing voice. Yeah, and please, and then after that, I read Nadezhda Remembers, and we'll finish chapter 1. And then I'll be back after that to answer your questions if you're still here. And we'll try to get Angelo back every few weeks then, if you guys like him.
Hold on, everyone. It's doing that weird thing with me not being able to add it. Sorry. Hold on. Hold on a second. It just won't let me share the video again. I had it pulled up before and then we had issues. All right, hold on 1 second. Why will it not? Hey, Asha, are you there? I don't know if she can hear me.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, I'm having problems with the. I have to do something to get the video to come on again because when we had
what?
the issue at the beginning. Because when we had the issue at the beginning, I had the video up and now it's not wanting to come on. So I have to.
Okay, should we? I don't know what's wrong. What's going on?
Oh, nothing. I didn't know if you could come on.
Well, here, I'll be talking and then just put the video back up whenever you need it, okay?
All right, I'm going to share it right now. Sorry, everyone.
Okay, no worries. I was going to eat dinner, but I guess dinner can wait. This is funny. How do I, okay, so dinner can wait, but here's me. So what's up, everyone? Let's see. Well, you know what? That's what I love about Lenin is that Lenin gives you that skill you need so that you're not such an idiot. Like he makes you really smart. So he basically if you like read the way Lenin goes through like all the bad things about like how I don't know, Plekhanov's really stupid or whatever, what you realize is that it doesn't even matter that you don't know who Plekhanov is. But instead, what you'll realize is that Plekhanov makes the same dumb arguments that whoever is in Washington Post right now who's writing op-eds is making. Plekhanov actually makes a little smarter argument, so then you'll kind of learn, oh, this is stupid, because Lenin said. And so Lenin actually walks you through their thing, the why it's stupid, and like breaks it down line by line. And when he does it over and over and over, if you read about 50 pieces, suddenly you become a lot smarter. So that's kind of like how why I love Lenin. Lenin is a human razor. I'm having pasta, I think. He's sharp and he cut through the sharp. No, he didn't cut. No, it was not like butter. It was much harder than that. But Lenin, we read a piece earlier, and Lenin once like trolled this guy in France about margarine, and I'm like, dude, don't you have like some kind of revolution to do instead of like trolling some random dude in France about margarine? And you can also relate to Lenin so much because he's so petty and just like you. I mean, one of my favorites is his first letter to his mother, where he says, P.S. Can you send me more money? Like, that's like so adorable. And his first letter to his sister, at the end he asks, P.S. Can you understand my handwriting? Yeah. He's like really adorable in that way, in that, like, yeah. Why are we arguing about cows when we have almonds? How do we have almonds? Oh, you can make almond milk and almond butter. Okay. So all you need is, what do you need to make something a milk? Today we have the very famous Commie Trucker from TikTok. So I guess what I know about you is that you're a trucker and you're a communist. Like, what made you start your TikTok?
I just I wanted to express my own sentiments towards the system of governance that's oppressive for minorities and the marginalized, and I wanted to express it in a way that I felt that was more patient and kind and forgiving than I had seen before. Everyone's always dealing with so much aggression and anger in their day to day that it often comes through. But the way I perceive it is we're all victims of capitalism. So I wanted to approach it in a way that was more forgiving than maybe others.
Oh, it's fantastic. And well, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
What I guess for me, what I really like is how you don't actually compromise any of the values, but you're still great at explaining from the basics, and you seem to do it within 1 minute.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find that communism is for the vast majority of us, and its simple tenets can be explained in a way that even truckers can understand.
Well,
it doesn't need to be tied up in confusing jargon, at least at the beginning. It can be, I mean, most people have this inherent core of selflessness and cooperation that they don't see communicated.
okay. Well, I think that actually truckers are probably one of the most revolutionary people I've been around with, because not only, like, you're the second trucker we've had, and not only is your job really hard, and I guess we had somebody else by the name of Tim Caboose. He was talking about these automated machines that like count. I forgot how it goes. Something about timings and drives, and just you guys are at the brunt of capitalism, but because also you travel a lot, I feel like it ends up like opening your perspectives in a way that many other jobs who suffer equally doesn't have that same opening of perspective.
We see every aspect of industry, and it's because of the nature of the work, where it's tended to be more masculine by traditional metrics. And so we get these old timers in that still are rabidly, if not pro-capitalist, then pro-status quo. And so I gotta say, in my terminal, I'm the only individual with leftist leanings. I can't speak for anyone else, but I have found other left-wing truckers on the internet. But the things I speak on are across all ideologies, whatever you claim to be. Everybody agrees on the basic tenets of communism. So I don't know.
I agree with you on a lot of that. As in, I think that if you are committed to having the truth and only the truth and the full truth, and you see things in a way that you want to make it better for most of us, or the wage workers, or the proletariat, reality will always lead you towards Marx.
100%.
So, can you tell us a little bit, like, how is your job as a trucker? Like, what are the hours? Like, how often do you get to stay home? The last trucker we talked about how he missed the birth of his daughter because of yeah,
that's brutal. I have it easier. I have a route that I run every day, and I'm home every night.
Oh, you do short distance.
Yes. It's all a short distance. I have too many kids to separate myself from my family. And those that do go over the road are a breed of another kind. But yeah, it's even locally, it's a lot of hours, 10 to 14 hours a day, depending. But I mean, it's a good trade to get into. I'm able to support my family with my wage. And
Wow.
yeah, that's important to me. There's little security in most other fields. So this is what I landed on. It's brutal. People don't treat you with respect, but I feel like that's in any field.
Yeah. I mean, in this culture, it's repeated that if you are poor or ordinary, you're, I guess, deserve it kind of thing. And that is so embedded into this culture that often I do see that people are very demanding or mean to the wait staff, like anyone that they say perceive as below them in the totem pole.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole aspect of having a consumer culture, is that so long as someone's serving you, they're below you. It's this craving for hierarchy that everyone has, that if you in any way serve someone who's buying, then you're beneath contempt. And so we treat our wait staff like garbage, and people that deliver things for us as though they're our property. And I'm arguing for a world where there's no exploitation, where we're all equals and we all have the same standing on the same ground.
I agree with you. And often, like, people don't understand, or at least in other cultures, in many Asian cultures, at least, like, they talk about how, like, when you have a service staff, they're like a equivalent of God. Like, there are other cultures that have it more deeply ingrained on why you should treat people who provide services for you with a lot of respect. One question. So I don't know if you're familiar how online you are, but are you familiar with the new debate on proletarian patriotism?
I am not.
Thank God. Okay, never mind.
Sounds
okay, good.
Terrible.
Okay. Okay. So the thing is that I feel like a lot of people imagine what the quote unquote, I guess, whatever they think is the white working class, and they it feels like they're pandering to their imagination of the white working class. And last year I was all over the country for Bernie. And I remember, like, I was in South Carolina and I was in the ruralist of the rural places. And, like, for a lot of the people who, like, I guess our society will call poor and white, life really sucked. And so they don't have the same feelings of, like, patriotism. Like, I didn't feel that. Like, I felt like they were very realistic about everything. And, and so I just don't feel it's necessary, because if you're that poor, life really sucks in America. And I saw in South Carolina, some places, oh my God, it looked like a third world country, and I was horrified.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The people in it that are working, that are most ignored, are often the people that shout loudest for their own subjugation. If that makes sense.
I don't understand.
Oh, I'm just saying that the working class have been conditioned for so long, for so many generations, that even when when all their life necessities are withheld and they have to live in squalor, they still will cheer loudly for their own country and for their own oppression.
I never saw that when I was in South Carolina. I saw that amongst like the middle class people, but not from the. But you're right in that this is why we need theory, because the way for the work, like if you're rich, the way to get your quote unquote rights is just like dumping a lot of money to somebody. And in our society, if you're poor, you don't have that money to dump. And so in order to fight for your rights, it's hard work. You have to figure out how to create the pool of people who are going to fight with you and what your strategy, what not. And I feel like it's been thoroughly defanged. For me, it was most obvious when Joe Biden earlier this year said something like, I will pay you $2,000 if you vote for the two people in Georgia. But then like he changed it to like $600. No.
Yeah. He just whittled it down little by little.
Yeah, and I was like, in any other country, that would have been riotous for somebody to just go, I don't know, like, what is it? Just go out and just, you know what I mean?
Meet the people.
Well, no, go out and like lie to the people. So like in India, there was no way. If you had done that, there would have been a new government and your head would have been on a pike.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in America, everyone kind of saw that they were helpless and basically, yeah, it seems like there was nothing that really was it. There was no apparatus to get some sort of action. You know what I mean?
No. It's because we're all individuals under capitalism. We're all individual consumers. We don't have any community left. So whenever we fail, we see it as a failure of the individual. We don't look to the community to wrap their wings around those who are hurt the most and protect them. We scoff at them and point our finger and say they made a bad decision. That's why they're that way. If I don't shape up, I can end up like them.
Exactly. No one. They look at their decisions, but not the game which led there. So I don't know. I'm not familiar. Like I don't know where you grew up with, but I just kind of want to we can pick any section you want. But I want to read like for me, this really makes a lot of sense. It's called Lenin's Letter to the Rural Poor. And funnily, 119 years later, a lot of this still applies to us. So, so the way Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels theorized the formation of the dictatorship of the proletariat was that capitalism was going to develop a lot and that would empty out the rural population and a lot of people would be in close quarters in the urban populations where they'd be working as factory workers or wage workers. And when you have a lot of urban workers working in close quarters together, they'll kind of realize, we don't need the bourgeoisie and get rid of them. But Russia had a different problem in that it was mostly a feudal economy where there was about 100 million peasants who were under corvée labor and extremely oppressive loans. And so, and the thing was that the idea was like, how do we have a revolution when we have a country as big as Russia, where we have 100 million people that's like all over, and we only have about 2 million of the proletariat. So this is where the Bolshevik and Menshevik split happened, because the Menshevik were kind of like, okay, let's just wait until capitalism develops and let's have a revolution 50 years, 100 years later. And Lenin, his opinion was like, no, we can't do that because look at how bad it is for our peasants who are totally slaves. We just can't do that. And so after the split, this is a letter that Lenin wrote to the rural poor. And the idea was that when urban workers, who many had who had families in rural areas, and when they went to visit them, they take this letter. And because the rural peasantry were super oppressed, not literate, just they were always under guard by by these death squads. They were a lot more cautious. Like you had to persuade them to show that yes, I have a decent plan. This is a good plan. And this is why we should do it. And this is Lenin's letter to help persuade the rural peasantry.
Part 1, the struggle of the urban workers. Many peasants have probably already heard about the labor unrest in the towns. Some of them have themselves been in the capitals and in the factories and have seen the riots, as the police call them. Others know workers who were involved in the unrest and were deported to their villages by the authorities. Others, again, must have seen the leaflets issued by the workers or pamphlets about the workers' struggle. Still others have only heard stories about what is going on in the towns from people with firsthand experience.
Oh, by the way, your voice is very amazing and nice and relaxing. You have a good reading voice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Formerly, only students rebelled, but now thousands and tens of thousands of workers have risen in all the big towns. In most cases, they fight against their employers, against the factory owners, against the capitalists. The workers declare strikes. All of them stop work at a factory at the same time and demand higher wages, demand that they should be made to work not 11 or 10 hours a day, but only 8 hours.
I like how Lenin always defines everything, because he knows that a lot of them are very illiterate. So, but he does it in a way without condescending.
Without condescending, yeah, exactly. Yeah. He doesn't talk down to these people. He treats them as the people with dignity that they are.
Yeah. But I like it that he also takes time to explain, because in modern America, so many people are too afraid to ask questions about things they don't know.
Absolutely. And then when you do ask questions, you're smugly derided for not having understood it.
Exactly.
To begin with. Where was I?
The workers also.
Yep. I also like how what they were fighting for, the 8 hours, we're still fighting for.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The workers also demand other things that make the working man's life easier. They want the workshops to be in better condition and the machines to be protected by special devices so as to prevent them from maiming the workers. They want their children to be able to go to school and the sick to be given proper aid in the hospitals. They want the workers' homes to be like human dwellings instead of being like pigsties. The police intervene in the workers' struggle. The police seize workers, throw them into prison, deport them without trial to their villages or even to Siberia. The government has passed laws banning strikes and workers' meetings, but the workers wage their fight against the police and against the government. The workers say, we, millions of working people, have bent our backs long enough. We have worked for the rich and remained paupers long enough. We have allowed them to rob us long enough. We want to unite in unions, to unite all the workers in one big workers' union, a workers' party, and to strive jointly for a better life. We want to achieve a new and better order of society. In this new and better society, there must be neither rich nor poor. All will have to work, not a handful of rich people, but all the working people must enjoy the fruits of their common labor. Machines and other improvements must serve to ease the work of all and not to enable a few to grow rich at the expense of millions and tens of millions of people.
And now billions.
Yeah. And that's just as applicable today as it ever was.
Yep.
Continuing, this new and better society is called socialist society. The teachings about this society are called socialism. The workers' unions, which fight for this better order of society, are called social democratic parties. Such parties exist openly in nearly all countries except Russia and Turkey. And our
part
workers,
of the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our workers, together with socialists from among the educated people, have also formed such a party, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. The government persecutes that party, but it exists in secret. Despite all prohibitions, it publishes its newspapers and pamphlets and organizes secret unions. The workers not only meet in secret, but come out into the streets in crowds and unfurl their banners, bearing the inscriptions, "Long live the 8-hour day, long live freedom, long live socialism." The government savagely persecutes the workers for this. It even sends troops to shoot down the workers. Russian soldiers have killed Russian workers in Yaroslavl, St. Petersburg, Riga, Rostov-on-Don, and Zlatsk. But the workers do not yield. They continue the fight. They say neither persecution, prison, deportation, penal servitude, nor death can frighten us. Our cause is a just one. We are fighting for the freedom and the happiness of all who work. We are fighting to free tens and hundreds of millions of people from abuse of power, oppression, and poverty. The workers are becoming more and more class conscious. The number of social democrats is growing fast in all countries. We shall win despite all persecution. The rural poor must clearly understand who these social democrats are, what they want, and what must be done in the countryside to help the social democrats to win happiness for the people.
Okay, so I guess I have one question. Lenin here says the workers are becoming more and more class conscious. And that's the one thing I noticed that many people online don't seem to have, or many people in real life are kind of afraid to exhibit too much of it. So, do you have any thoughts on how to promote an improved understanding of class consciousness in the society?
Yeah. We have to tie our charity and our aid that we give to people in need to a message of communism. We can't shy away from words like socialism or communism. We have to promote it while we're helping people. When we interact with people on the internet, on Twitter and TikTok and Facebook, we're often putting the cart before the horse. We think we're going to save the world, or we think we're going to change minds to save the world, where we should be saving lives to change minds.
Oh, I love that. That's a very eloquent way of putting this. I'm so clipping this and making a TikTok out of this.
Okay, please do. But yeah, we need to improve people's lives. That's the only way to change their minds. We're not going to change minds by arguing with them or deriding them. We have to help people. That's it.
And that's a lot of what the Bolsheviks did. I mean, for example, when these workers went to prison, well, the first thing that Lenin did was teach them how to read. And by the way, for the viewers at home, right after this, we'll be airing the rest of chapter 1 of Nadezhda Krupskaya's book, Nadezhda Remembers. And we can see that Lenin was teaching, like he came to St. Petersburg to teach the workers how to read. He helped organize, what do you call it? Like mass strikes, and they even like took care of children when some of the workers were carted away to prison. And so, yeah, a lot of the ways the Bolsheviks were improving the lives, unfortunately, because of how they improved the lives of like the nobodies, it's not, a lot of it did not get captured in history, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because history doesn't look at the impoverished and how their lives changed. It only looks at the key players in world events.
Yeah. And for the longest time, I mean, literacy was for the elite. So most of written history is literally for the elite, and we've lost everything about the common person that we can't discover via anthropology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's infuriating that we're not only ignored by today's standards of importance, but we've been ignored by the entirety of history because we've been oppressed for so long because we have to work.
Exactly. So we should let me know when you're ready. Go ahead.
I love how Lenin's writing is so applicable always to today's standards.
Yeah. It's always applicable. Like sometimes you don't even have to change much. Like once I remembered having to change everything from Cadet Party to the Democratic Party, and everything worked. And it shows you that the way capitalism ends up shaping a lot, like if the same patterns of behavior can repeat over and over through time and space, it shows you like how much, I guess, how ununique we are, and how much how little control we have over our lives, and how much of it is shaped by society, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready for part 2.
What do the Social Democrats want? You ready? The Russian Social Democrats are first and foremost striving to win political liberty. They need political liberty in order to unite all the Russian workers extensively and openly in the struggle for a new and better socialist order of society. What is political liberty? To understand this, the peasant should first compare his present state of freedom with serfdom. Under the serf-owning system, the peasant could not marry without the landlord's permission. Today, the peasant is free to marry without anyone's permission. Under the serf-owning system, the peasant had unfailingly to work for his landlord on days fixed by the latter's bailiff. Today, the peasant is free to decide which employer to work for, on which days, and for what pay. Under the serf-owning system, the peasant could not leave his village without the landlord's permission. Today, the peasant is free to go wherever he pleases. If the mayor allows him to go, if he is not in the arrears with his taxes.
Okay. Mayor is like a city council of bourgeoisie people. Okay, go ahead.
If he can get a passport, and if the governor or the police chief does not forbid his changing residence.
Yeah. I like how he's free to go wherever he pleases. And then there's
he's allowed.
Yeah.
If they let him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thus, even today, the peasant is not quite free to go where he pleases. He does not enjoy complete freedom of movement. The peasant is still a semi-serf. Later on, we shall explain in detail why the Russian peasant is still a semi-serf and what he must do to escape from this condition. Under the serf-owning system, the peasant had no right to acquire property without the landlord's permission. He could not buy land. Today, the peasant is free to acquire any kind of property, but even today, he is not quite free to leave the mere. He is not quite free to dispose of his land as he pleases. Under the serf-owning system, the peasant could be flogged by order of the landlord. Today, the peasant cannot be flogged by order of the landlord, although he is still liable to corporal punishment.
Yeah, he can be flogged back then he could have been flogged if the judge ordered them, which was a big difference.
Yeah. This freedom is called civil liberty. Freedom in family matters and private matters and matters concerning property. The peasant and the worker are free, although not quite, to arrange their family life and their private affairs, to dispose of their labor, choose their employer, and their property. But neither the Russian workers nor the Russian people as a whole are yet free to arrange their public affairs. The people as a whole are the serfs of the government officials, just as the peasants were the serfs of the landlords. The Russian people have no right to choose their officials, no right to elect representatives to legislate for the whole country. The Russian people have not even the right to arrange meetings for the discussion of state affairs. We dare not even print newspapers or books, and dare not even speak to all and for all on matters concerning the whole state without permission from officials who have been put in authority over us without our consent, just as the landlord used to appoint his bailiff without the consent of the peasants. Just as the peasants were the slaves of the landlords, so the Russian people are still the slaves of the officials. Just as the peasants lacked civil freedom under the serf-owning system, so the Russian people still lack political liberty. Political liberty means the freedom of the people to arrange their public state affairs. Political liberty means the right of the people to elect their representatives, deputies, to a state Duma, parliament. All laws should be discussed and passed. All taxes should be fixed only by a state Duma, parliament, elected by the people themselves. Political liberty means the right of the people themselves to choose all their officials, arrange all kinds of meetings for the discussion of all state affairs, and publish whatever papers and books they please without having to ask for permission. All other European peoples won political liberty for themselves long ago. Only in Turkey and in Russia are the people still politically enslaved by the Sultan's government and by the Tsarist autocratic government. Tsarist autocracy means the unlimited power of the Tsar. The people have no voice in determining the structure of the state or in running it.
Here,
all laws are made. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying that what people in America, like the reason why they keep having to say freedom, democracy, freedom is because most people actually do not have a voice in determining the structure or running it. And they'll say, oh, you just have to get elected. But then in order to get elected, you need to fundraise. And then if you fundraise, you need to talk to a lot of rich people. And if you even look at Obama's book, where he talks about how he became more right wing after he started fundraising with rich people, it's like by the time you end up getting elected, you turn into a perfect right winger.
Yeah, you're their creature. So you have to become their creature in order to have any effect on the governance of your country.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So while it may technically be freedom, it seems like exactly like those Lenin conditions, like, you know how Lenin put all those conditions for the peasants? That's kind of like how that's how I feel a lot of times in America.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're given the appearance of having representation, but that representation isn't for us. It's for whatever product they're endorsing. It's whatever corporation is endorsing them that has the representation.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, just because Congress has to just repeatedly, like people, even with the best of intentions, I think they're spending like 30 hours a week just calling up rich people and begging for money, and that just like literally makes them cater to rich people in order to get elected. And like, there's no way around it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's see. I was at Tsarist autocracy. Yep. Sorry. Tsarist autocracy means the unlimited power of the Tsar. The people have no voice in determining the structure of the state or in running it. All laws are made and all officials are appointed by the Tsar alone, by his personal unlimited autocratic authority. But, of course, the Tsar cannot even know all Russian laws and all Russian officials. The Tsar cannot even know all that goes on in the country. The Tsar simply endorses the will of a few score of the richest and most high-born officials. However much he may desire to, one man cannot govern a vast country like Russia or America. It is not the Tsar who governs Russia. It is only a manner of speech to talk about autocratic one-man rule. Russia is governed by a handful of the richest and most high-born officials.
Sounds familiar.
The Tsar learns only what this handful are pleased to tell him. The Tsar cannot in any way go against the will of this handful of high-ranking nobles. The Tsar himself is a landlord and a member of the nobility. Since his earliest childhood, he has lived only among these high-born people. It was they who brought him up and educated him. He knows about the Russian people as a whole only that which is known to these noble gentry, these rich landlords, and the few very rich merchants who are received at the Tsar's court.
And this is a lot. I mean, like that's the same thing with the president of the United States, in that, for example, Obama's cabinet was vetted by Citibank. So it's I've also written about Eric Holder, who wrote this memo in 1999 called "Too Big to Fail," and Citibank was the top recipient of the Wall Street bailout. So, and they got to pick Eric Holder, and they knew that this man believed they are too big to fail. And so it was a farce.
Absolutely. The only thing they see is what they've been conditioned to see. Okay. In every Volast administration office, what's Volast?
Volast is like, okay, it's bigger. It's bigger than city. It's smaller than state. So maybe county.
Okay. In every Volast administration office, you will find the same picture hanging on the wall. It depicts the Tsar, Alexander III, the father of the present Tsar, speaking to the Volast headmen who have come to his coronation. Obey your marshals of the nobility. The Tsar is ordering them. And the present Tsar, Nicholas II, has repeated those words. Thus, the Tsars themselves admit that they can govern the country only with the aid of nobility and through the nobility. We must well remember those words of the Tsars about the peasants having to obey the nobility. We must clearly understand what a lie is being told the people by those who try to make out that Tsarist government is the best form of government. In other countries, those people say the government is elected, but it is the rich who are elected, and they govern unjustly and oppress the poor. In Russia, the government is not elected. An autocratic czar governs the whole country. The Tsar stands above everyone, rich and poor. The Tsar, they tell us, is just to everyone, to the poor and to the rich alike.
Okay, so it's kind of funny because so the Constitution allegedly sets out limits on presidential powers, but we've seen every single president, at least in my lifetime, has flagrantly violated every single of those limits, and there's nothing to hold them back. Like, I've always wondered, do you remember when Trump said he could shoot anyone in Fifth Avenue?
Yeah.
Well, I've always wondered what the corollary is. Like, what is the biggest crime that the president can get away with? And I can't think of anything that will stop him.
No, they've all committed war crimes. They've all committed violations of human rights. So what else can they do? Dick Cheney shot a lawyer in the face, and that lawyer apologized to him for it. What's going on? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We have literal concentration camps holding refugees on the border. I mean, what else can we do?
I know.
What else can the president do?
Yeah. Like, I always want to say this so that people kind of understand that while technically there may be a written constitution with some kind of limits, it's illusory. It doesn't exist really, because when we look at what the president is allowed to do, wow.
It's whatever. Yeah, it's whatever they want. And it goes down all the way to the simple policeman. It doesn't protect people from policemen, from police brutality. Policemen have been shown to continuously do whatever violations they find right in the moment. And so there is no rule of law. There's no human rights. We're all at the mercy of whoever's in power.
That's actually complete. Oh, hold on. I have one. What you mentioned, it's very interesting because it's like trickle down. It's a lot of trickle down
brutality.
Yeah.
Trickle down brutality. Yeah.
So you're right. It is at yes, in each level, it is there's a lot of arbitrariness. Okay.
Absolutely. It's however they're feeling at the moment.
Unbelievable.
It's what's going to be persecuted. Okay. Such talk is sheer hypocrisy. Every Russian knows the kind of justice that is dispensed by our government. Everybody knows whether a plain worker or a farm laborer in our country can become a member of the state council. It's the same. I mean, it's like Lenin is writing today.
Yeah.
In all other European countries, however, factory workers and farmhands have been elected to the State Duma. They have been able to speak freely to all the people about the miserable conditions of the workers and call upon the workers to unite and fight for a better life. And no one has dared to stop these speeches of the people's representatives. No policeman has dared to lay a finger on them. In Russia, there's no elective government, and she is governed not merely by the rich and the high-born, but by the worst of these.
This one is like, yes, I feel like when you look at Trump, Biden's administration, of course, like Blinken.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely the worst of these worst.
Yeah, but the clown that was Trump was pretty great.
Yeah, I was shocked by how much he just kind of let, like, Jared Kushner. Oh my God! Like
Ivanka,
the Saudi,
all of his buddies.
Yeah. The Saudi prince literally said, "I have Jared Kushner in my pocket," as in he bribed him, and nothing. No one cared.
Nothing. No, because the only thing the media is concerned about covering is if if Trump violated some principle of norms.
Yes, just like he was like he wanted. He
If
said
he was rude.
Yeah, like he said that we want to invade Venezuela for its oil, which is the truth, as opposed to we want to invade Venezuela to bring freedom and democracy. And yeah, there were exactly. Okay.
I'm with you. Okay, and
she is governed.
Okay. She is governed by the most skillful intriguers at the Tsar's court, by the most artful tricksters, by those who carry lies and slanders to the Tsar and flatter and toady to him.
Exactly.
That's pretty great. They govern in secret. The people do not and cannot know what new laws are being drafted, what wars are being hatched, what new taxes are being introduced, which officials are being rewarded and for what services, and which are being dismissed. In no country is there such a multitude of officials as in Russia. These officials tower above the voiceless people like a dark forest. A mere worker can never make his way through this forest, can never obtain justice.
Hold on. This is one thing that I think liberals do not understand. When you have a system created where James Madison says the purpose of our government is to protect those with property from those without, like, there is no way to just follow their rules and obtain justice. And often liberals just miss this idea.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit into their narrative.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Not a single complaint against bribery, robbery, or abuse of power on the part of the officials is ever brought to light. Every complaint is smothered in official red tape. The voice of the individual never reaches the whole people, but is lost in the stark jungle, stifled into the police torture chamber. An army of officials who are never elected by the people and who are not responsible to the people has woven a thick web, and men and women are struggling in this web like flies.
I can't say ours is that different. I mean, like all our federal agencies is basically that. Yeah, go ahead.
Tsarist autocracy is an autocracy of officials. Tsarist autocracy means the feudal dependency of the people upon the officials and especially upon the police. Tsarist autocracy is police autocracy. That is why the workers come out into the street with banners bearing the inscriptions, "Down with the autocracy, long live political liberty." That is why the tens of millions of the rural poor must also support and take up this battle cry of the urban workers. Like them, undaunted by persecution, fearless of the enemy's threats and violence, and undeterred by the first reverses, the agricultural laborers and the poor peasants must come forward for a decisive struggle for the freedom of the whole of the Russian people and demand, first of all, the convocation of the representatives of the people. Let the people themselves all over Russia elect the representatives. Let those representatives form a supreme assembly, which will introduce elective government in Russia, free the people from the feudal dependence upon the officials and the police, and secure for the people the right to meet freely, speak freely, and have a free press. That is what the Social Democrats want first and foremost. That is the meaning of the First Amendment, the demand for political liberty.
Yeah. I mean, yes, like, and we don't, well, people think that we may have free speech. We don't. In that, for example, if it's in the guise of national security, so I remember Obama once droned this guy and his 16-year-old kid, and technically he was for terrorism, but he hasn't done any terrorism other than have a YouTube show or like make YouTube videos.
Yeah, what's he doing now?
Netflix videos, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so while they will say, oh, you have the First Amendment right to free speech, when you closely examine it, a lot of what is free speech is Citizens United, like money speech, but you can't, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to trickle down to what the proletarians, like what you and I would need speech for.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it goes along with what's being broadcast on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
The people with the freest of speech are those with those little blue check marks.
Mm-hmm.
The people with the money, they get their voice out easily just by existing. But if 10,000 people are speaking on a subject of stop line 3, their voices are silenced and they're ignored, and nobody hears their cries for help. It's free speech according to wealth.
That's an excellent way to put it.
Okay. We know that political liberty, free elections to the State Duma, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press will not at once deliver the working people from poverty and oppression. There is no means of immediately delivering the poor of town and country from the burden of working for the rich. The working people have no one to place their hopes in and no one to rely upon but themselves. Nobody will free the working man from poverty if he does not free himself. And to free themselves, the workers of the whole country, the whole of Russia, must unite in one union and one party. Excuse me. But millions of workers cannot unite if the autocratic police government bans all meetings, all workers' newspapers, and the election of workers' deputies. To unite, they must have the right to form unions of every kind, must have freedom to unite, they must enjoy political liberty. So basically, he's just here arguing that even for people to attain any semblance of freedom, these basic precepts must be met first.
Yep. And even America today, we have not met those, regardless of what they might tell you in the propaganda.
Absolutely. I mean, I live in a right to work state where our unions have no power.
So what is a right to work state for those who may not be too familiar?
I believe essentially it's a union cannot get a union. If a union is in a business, they cannot collect union dues from all the employees, even if the employees get the benefits of that union.
That sounds like a way to bankrupt them.
Oh, and it's working.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have to voluntarily give union dues.
And so people need to be super class conscious, which they are not. And and people are paid so little that sometimes the union dues, like $100 or whatever it is, ends up looking nice.
I mean, when you're making $15 an hour and your union due at the end of the month is $23, you need that $23.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Political liberty will not at once deliver the working people from poverty, but it will give the workers a weapon with which to fight poverty. There is no other means, and there can be no other means of fighting poverty except the unity of the workers themselves. But millions of people cannot unite unless there is political liberty. In all European countries where the people have won political liberty, the workers began to unite long ago. Throughout the whole of Europe, workers who own no land and no workshops and work for other people for wages all their lives are called proletarians. Over 50 years ago, the call was sounded for the working people to unite. Workers of all countries unite. During the past 50 years, these words have circled the whole globe, are repeated at tens and hundreds of thousands of workers' meetings, and can be read in millions of social democratic pamphlets and newspapers in every language. Of course, to unite millions of workers in one union and one party is an extremely difficult task. It requires time, persistence, perseverance, and courage. The workers are ground down by poverty and want, benumbed by ceaseless toil for the capitalists and landlords. Often they have not even the time to think of why they remain perpetual paupers or how to be delivered from this. Everything is done to prevent the workers from uniting, either by means of direct and brutal violence, as in countries like Russia, where there is no political liberty, or by refusing to employ workers who preach the doctrines of socialism, or lastly, by means of deceit and bribery. But no violence or persecution can stop the proletarian workers from fighting for the great cause of the emancipation of all working people from poverty and oppression. The number of social democratic workers is constantly growing. Take our neighboring country, Germany. There they have elective government. Formerly, in Germany too, there was an unlimited autocratic monarchist government. But long ago, over 50 years ago, the German people destroyed the autocracy and won political liberty by force. In Germany, laws are not made by a handful of officials, as in Russia, but by an assembly of people's representatives, by parliament, by the Reichstag, as the Germans call it. All adult males take part in electing deputies to this assembly. This makes it possible to count how many votes were cast for the Social Democrats. In 1887, 1/10 of all votes were cast for the Social Democrats. In 1898, when the most recent elections to the Reichstag took place, the Social Democratic vote increased nearly threefold. This time, more than 1/4 of all the votes were cast for the Social Democrats. Over 2 million adult males voted for Social Democratic candidates to parliament. Among the farm laborers of Germany, socialism is not yet widespread, but it is now making very rapid progress among them. And when the masses of farmhands, day laborers, and poor, pauperized peasants unite with their brothers in the towns, the German workers will win and establish an order under which the working people will suffer neither poverty nor oppression. Now, there was a part up here that had me thinking.
Which part?
Let me see. Oh, yeah. The workers are ground down by poverty and want, benumbed by ceaseless toil for the capitalists and landlords. I mean, that's even more true today.
Yeah,
we're expected to work.
And often
20 hours a day.
Often they have not even time to think about why they remain perpetual paupers or how to be delivered from this. And seems like even in some ways, it seems to be even worse than back then.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're more productive, work more hours for less pay than ever before.
Yeah.
And we're so ground down, like Lenin said, that we don't have time to even question our existence and if it can be improved. We accept what little we have, and we continue to fight for the scraps we're given.
Yep.
Let's see.
By what means do the Social Democratic...
Yep. Okay. By what means do the Social Democratic workers want to deliver the people from poverty? To know this, one must clearly understand the cause of the poverty of the vast masses of the people under the present social order. Rich cities are growing, magnificent shops and houses are being built, railways are being constructed, all kinds of machines and improvements are being introduced in industry and agriculture, but millions of people remain in poverty and continue to work all their lives to provide a bare subsistence for their families. That is not all. More and more people are becoming unemployed. Both in town and country, there are more and more people who can find no work at all. In the villages, they starve, while in the towns, they swell the ranks of the tramps and down and outs.
Homeless people.
Find refuge like beasts in dugouts on the outskirts of town or in dreadful slums and cellars, such as those in the Kitrov market in Moscow. Why is this? Wealth and luxury are increasing, and yet the millions and millions who, by their labor, create all this wealth remain in poverty and want. Peasants are dying of starvation. Workers wander about without employment, and yet merchants export millions of
poods, which is like a little over 10 or something like that.
Okay. Export millions of poods of grain from Russia to foreign countries. Factories are standing idle because the goods cannot be sold, for there is no market for them. Because of all this, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say this part about both the half the population, like even today we have that in America where half the population is working as like in Amazon, not half, but there's a lot of people in Amazon warehouses, they work ridiculous hours. And then we still have such a high unemployment rate. And it's like, wait a minute, why not say that everyone's going to work, I don't know, 8 hours, give them good wages. And then, I mean, you know what I mean? We also have the both ends of the spectrum.
No, absolutely. And when we say the people are underemployed, that just means they're not paid enough. It's people are employed enough. You know, if you work 32 hours a week but still can't afford rent, that doesn't mean you're not working enough. That just means you're not being paid enough.
Exactly.
And so people call them underemployed because it serves the capitalists. They just need to get a second job. They just need to get a third job. Like, how much harder do we have to work to attain a life of dignity? I don't know, just my thoughts on it.
No, you're absolutely right on this in that I didn't think about it, but yes, underemployed is absolutely that, in that they don't have, their wages can't, it has nothing to do with how hard they work. And then, of course, when we get to later to imperialism, the highest stage, we kind of understand how this whole trickle down goes worse and worse as like American workers have it really hard, but like once you go into the cobalt mines, they're working even harder for even less pay. And I'm sure. Like it's child slaves, and you know what I mean? And so it's like the same system keeps going. Like once you go down deeper and deeper, less of it is trickling down. And I guess a lot of times, for me at least, a lot of times Americans look at how bad the poverty is and don't understand that it's even possible to make it even worse. And they have made it worse in other countries.
Or we make a lot of comments I get from reactionaries in my videos are, they compare the poverty in the United States to the poverty in the rest of the world. They say, well, you could have it worse here or here.
No, but they don't understand that or you could have it better in both places because the cause of the poverty is literally the same bloody thing. And why do you want to make Jeff Bezos get the money as opposed to letting that child in Congo go to school?
Yeah, that's not an argument against communism. That's an argument against capitalism. That poverty exists all around the world because of capitalism.
Yep.
And because of the imperialist resource extraction from the United States.
Yep. And Europe, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are we even arguing here? People, come on.
Exactly. You're right. I mean, it's like not, and I hate having to say this, but like that YouTuber who's like totally nuts, he always says, not an argument. Yeah, this is not an argument.
Yeah. It's great. I get so many reactionaries in my comments and they always argue against communism with examples of capitalism.
Okay. Well, I get a different type of reactionaries where it's like, my favorite is like every few months I'll go viral for this, but some idiot asks, have you ever asked somebody who lived in a communist country? And then I show them my interview where I went to old people. When I was in Moscow, I went to old people and asked them, do you prefer communism or capitalism? And so it's funny. Every few months I'll go viral because of this, because some old boomer in TikTok always asks that question. What people, I guess, okay, there's another thing that I want to talk about later, but let's finish this.
Okay. Let's get through this quick. The cause of all of this, first of all, the most of the land and also the factories, workshops, machines, buildings, ships, etc., belong to a small number of rich people. Tens of millions of people work on this land and at these factories and workshops, but they are all owned by a few thousand or tens of thousands of rich people, landlords, merchants, and factory owners. The people work for those rich men for hire, for wages, for a crust of bread. That's a great line.
Mm-hmm.
All that is produced over and above what is required to provide a bare subsistence for the workers goes to the rich. This is their profit, their income. All the benefits arising from the use of machines and from improvements in methods of production go to the landowners and capitalists. They accumulate wealth untold, while the workers get only a miserable pittance. The workers are brought together for work. On large estates and at big factories, several hundred and sometimes even several thousand workers are employed. When labor is united in this way, and when the most diverse kinds of machines are employed, work becomes more productive. One worker produces much more than scores of workers did working separately and without the aid of machines. But the benefits of this more productive labor go not to all the working people, but to an insignificant number of big landowners, merchants, and factory owners. One often hears it said that the landlords and merchants provide work for the people, that they provide the poor with earnings. It is said, for instance, that a neighboring factory or a neighboring landlord maintains the local peasants. Actually, however, the workers, by their labor, maintain themselves and also all those who do not work themselves. But for permission to work on the landlord's land at a factory or on a railway, the worker gives the owner gratis all he produces, while the worker himself gets only enough for a bare subsistence. Actually, and therefore, it is not the landlords and the merchants who give the workers employment, but the workers who by their labor maintain everybody, surrendering gratis the greater part of the labor.
This reminds me of how they always talk about job creators, and it's like, no, you're not a job creator.
Nope.
Like, yeah, it just, and then, like, it's like the only reason you're a job creator is because the government allows you to be a job creator.
Yeah. Because you're subsidized by the labor of the workers.
Yeah. And also in every other way, like who do you think started the first factory? Like you got started because some idiot was related to the Queen of England. So it's like, come on, dude. Like the only thing you explain is how close you are to the Queen of, like, I mean, and that's the thing is, once on Twitter, I did a thread where I looked up a lot of these billionaires, and it's like, oh, Bill Gates's mom was like the head of a bank. Oh, Jeff Bezos, I don't want to, probably, it's very weird. But what you see is that it's not like they were, most of these billionaires even were just like rich kids whose parents just like funded lots of
paid for them to get whatever credentials they needed to make the friends they needed to own the factories.
Exactly.
Further, in all present day states, the people's poverty is due to the fact that the workers produce all sorts of articles for sale for the market. The factory owner and the artisan, the landlord and the well-to-do peasant produce various goods, raise cattle, sow and harvest grain for sale in order to obtain money. Money has everywhere become the ruling power. All the goods produced by human labor are exchanged for money. With money, you can buy anything. With money, you can even buy a man. That is to say, force a man who owns nothing to work for another who has money. Excuse me. Formerly, land used to be the ruling power. That was the case under the serf-owning system. Whoever possessed the land possessed power and authority. Today, however, money, capital, has become the ruling power. With money, you can buy as much land as you like. Without money, you will not be able to do much even if you have land.
Mm-hmm.
You must have money to buy a plow or other implements, to buy livestock, to buy clothes and other town-made goods, not to speak of paying taxes. For the sake of money, nearly all the landlords have mortgaged their estates to the banks. To get money, the government borrows from rich people and bankers all over the world and pays hundreds of millions of rubles yearly in interest on these loans. For the sake of money, everyone today is waging a fierce war against everyone else. Each tries to buy cheap and to sell dear. Each tries to get ahead of the other, to sell as many goods as possible, to undercut the other, to conceal from him a profitable market or a profitable contract. In this general scramble for money, the little man, the petty artisan, or the small peasant fares worse than all. He is always left behind by the rich merchant or the rich peasant. The little man never has any reserves. He lives from hand to mouth. Each difficulty or accident compels him to pawn his last belongings or to sell his livestock at a trifling price. Once he has fallen into the clutches of a kulak or of a usurer, he very rarely succeeds in escaping from the net. And in most cases, he is utterly ruined. Every year, tens of hundreds of thousands of peasants and artisans lock up their cottages, surrender their holdings to the commune gratis, and become wage workers, farmhands, unskilled workers, proletarians. But the rich grow richer and richer in this struggle for money. They pile up millions and hundreds of millions of rubles in the banks and make profit not only with their own money, but also with the money deposited in the banks by others. The little man who deposits a few score or a few hundred rubles in a bank or a savings bank receives interest at the rate of 3 or 4 kopecks to the ruble. But the rich make millions out of these scores and use these millions to increase their turnover and make 10 and 20 kopecks to the ruble. That is why the social democratic workers say that the only way to put an end to the poverty of the people is to change the existing order from top to bottom throughout the country and to establish a socialist order. In other words, to take the estates from the big landowners, the factories from the factory owners, and money capital from the bankers to abolish their private property and turn it over to the whole working people throughout the country. When that is done, the workers' labor will be made use of, not by rich people living on the labor of others, but by the workers themselves and by those elected by them. The fruits of common labor and the advantages from all improvements and machinery will then benefit all the working people, all the workers. Wealth will then grow at a still faster rate because the workers will work better for themselves than they did for the capitalists. The working day will be shorter, the workers' standard of living will be higher, and all their conditions of life will be completely changed.
Okay, so I just want to make one quick comment where he says that the way to put an end to poverty of the people is to change the existing order from top to bottom. And often, like, you'll hear like really annoying liberals and concerned trolls and even official orthodoxy is that, oh, you have to start from the bottom and go grassroots. And they do that because when you start from the bottom and go grassroots, essentially they can quell anything that picks up a movement. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
You just have to take power. Okay, go ahead.
But it is not an easy matter to change the existing order throughout the country. That requires a great deal of effort, a long and stubborn struggle. All the rich, all the property owners, all the bourgeoisie will defend their riches with all their might. The officials and the army will rise to defend all the rich class because the government itself is in the hands of the rich class. The workers must rally as one man for the struggle against all those who live on the labor of others. The workers themselves must unite and help to unite all the poor in a single working class, in a single proletarian class. The struggle will not be easy for the working class, but it will certainly end in the workers' victory because the bourgeoisie, or those who live on the labor of others, are an insignificant minority of the population, while the working class is the vast majority. The workers against the property owners means millions against thousands. And this is a main sticking point for me is we outnumber them.
Yes, by billions now.
yes. There's something like 3,000 billionaires in the world.
And 7 billion people in the world.
Yeah. I mean, we literally have all the power.
Yeah.
But it's just breaking through that conditioning that we've all been subjected to for so many generations. Okay.
No, I agree
yeah.
Go ahead.
The workers in Russia are already beginning to unite for this great struggle in a single workers' social democratic party. Difficult as it is to unite in secret, hiding from the police, nevertheless, the organization is growing and gaining strength. When the Russian people have won political liberty, the work of uniting the working class, the cause of socialism, will advance much more rapidly than it is advancing among the German workers.
Well, Lenin was right about that.
100%,
yeah. So I forgot what I was going to say, but it had to do with like often I feel that there's a lot of people who, if presented with these ideas, would agree with us and would even like be enthusiastic, but it's kind of hard to all of us to unite at the same. Like, it's like people need a critical, it's like a chicken and egg problem where you need a critical mass of people for other people to feel confident enough to come out in the open.
Yeah, it's excuse me. It's not just the confidence in a movement. It's also breaking through that that scrap of privilege that we all have. Like we're so beat down every day. We're exhausted. We're too exhausted to move forward with any movement. And we're given, say we have a job with healthcare. Mm-hmm. If we unite and fight that employer for better conditions, mm-hmm. who's to say they're not going to fire us? And then we lose all healthcare.
I mean, that is what happened with one of these strikes is, I forgot which company, but they did blockade the healthcare. And yep. Yeah, so the only way to do it is, okay, the only way to do it is for all of us to just like turn off the lights at the same time. So then the insurance companies, like, you know what I mean? They can't do that. Like if 100, well, so we literally need the 300 million people in America to turn off the lights at the same time. And I'll tell you about this, but I won't be able to show it to you. I'll send it to you via TikTok. But Margaret Thatcher did this really weird analysis about how long the country can survive without each kind of worker. And the first type of worker that the country cannot survive is actually the garbage collector.
Yes.
2 weeks maximum.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Just think of the disease that would spread. And we each have an important role to play. We're made to feel, especially in the service industry, we're made to feel like our labor is replaceable. And then in those few months where we were essential, that just told us that we're expendable because we were out in the thick of it in the middle of a fucking pandemic. And we were given no benefits for that. Mm-mm. We were told we had to work because, oh, look, everyone has yard signs that says that we're important and that we're special, but that was it. That was it. We're never compensated accurately, even when our lives are in threat.
I agree. And for that, like I said, it's like really, so yes, they can replace one of us. But if they cannot replace 100 million of us. So like in order for, and that's the problem is that you need that large scale where India is able to have an all India strike every few years. Mm-hmm. We've never had one in the US. And I mean, if you go via numbers, like there's clearly more people there. So you can't say because the US has a bigger population than most countries, which it does, but it's no excuse. No. So it's like, that's the thing is that if striking feels precarious, it's because it's a counterintuitive, but it's not big enough. Like you need more than the John Deere workers. You need everyone. So all that, like the truckers, the shippers, the whatever else I don't know.
Yeah. Everyone has a role to play in the revolution.
Exactly.
But we need to all get on the same page. It's hard to do that because I I blame a lot of this on every aspect of the media, where everything that goes to benefit the working people is introduced by the media as a benefit or as something that we're given and not something that we take or something we deserve.
Exactly. Like I've noticed this. I always say that the media is not like, I just tell you what I know via New York Times. I've looked through what they said. So because Mussolini was like really cruel to workers, they called him a new hope. But then with the Bolsheviks, they made up stories about how they were boiling babies alive or something. And so it's wrong to think that our information is that we have everything we need with information, because they demonize everything that's pro-worker is demonized as bad. And and that's because the media is an advocate for the ruling class. And I agree with you on that. Yes, everything is either presented by a benefit by the generosity of the rich, or like or just as a bad thing because it benefits the poor. Like no one asks.
We can't afford it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, no one ever asks, how are you going to pay for your wars? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, you're right. They do it by they try to limit. Like there's a lot of fear mongering and xenophobia, of course, limiting information. But yeah, all of that is there. Okay. By the way, how do people find you? So you're big on TikTok. So can you tell us how to find you?
Yes. Excuse me. I am Commie_Trucker on TikTok. It's the same on Twitter.
Nice.
I have a podcast where I'm interviewing Jules from Good Morning Bad News this Saturday. It's called The Precariat.
What's it called again?
And The Precariat.
Is it like precarious proletariat?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay, I'm gonna start subscribing to it then.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And me and a few friends started a YouTube channel where our stated goal is to build a pipeline to the alt left, to counter the alt right pipeline. It's called SJLA.
What does that stand for?
Social Justice League of America. It's kind of a comic book play on words. Okay.
Well, hopefully we can also make it like like what Lenin did because Lenin's first step was creating an all Russia newspaper. And I guess like podcasts and YouTube are the new all American newspaper, I guess. And so, yeah, please subscribe and we'll put the links in. And yeah, this was really great. Thanks for coming on such short notice.
I had a blast. I was super nervous coming on because you're kind of intimidating. You're a brilliant, you're a brilliant worker, and I always appreciated your work. But you made it easy. Thank you.
No worries. I'm only intimidating when people talk about their anti-communist relatives in Ukraine from 1940. I'm like, no, I don't. Yeah, in TikTok, somebody did that. He was like, well, my anti-communist are weeping. And I'm like, well, so they're alive to weep? Yeah, that's the only time.
Why were they anti-communist?
Like, no, and then like, also, who did they exterminate? I mean, like, you're just like, okay. And I know the class nature of who's allowed to, like, I just know, like, so because of that,
or the Cuban immigrants in Florida, why did they flee Cuba during the revolution?
Slaves. Yeah, exactly. And so because of that, like, I'm not falling for nonsense about how you're, it's like, okay. And like, so that's the only time I get mean, but thank you so much. And we're really excited, and hopefully we can have, and everyone, right after this, we're going to air the rest of chapter 1 of Nadezhda Remembers, so you can learn about the early years of Lenin's life.
Bye.
Vladimir Ilyich carefully built up these contacts by searching everywhere for people who were likely, in one way or another, to be of use in revolutionary work. I remember a conference that was held on Vladimir Ilyitch's initiative between the representatives of our group, Vladimir Ilyich and Krzyzhanovsky, if I'm not mistaken, and a group of women teachers of the Sunday school. Nearly all of them afterwards became social democrats. Among them was Lydia Knipovich, an old member of the Narodnaya Volya, who afterwards joined the Social Democrats. Old party workers remember her, a woman of great revolutionary self-discipline, exacting both herself and others, a splendid comrade, an excellent judge of people, who surrounded those she worked with love and solicitude. Lydia was quick to appreciate the revolutionary in Vladimir Ilyich. Lydia undertook to handle all the contacts with Narodnaya Volya printing plant. She made all the arrangements for printing, passed over the MSS, took delivery of the printed pamphlets, carried them round to her friends in baskets, and organized the distribution of literature among the workers. When she was arrested, betrayed by a compositor at the plant, 12 baskets with illegal pamphlets were confiscated from various friends of hers. The Narodovoltsy printed mass editions of pamphlets for the workers at the time, such as The Working Day, Lives and Interests, Vladimir Ilyitch's pamphlet on fines, king hunger, etc. Two of the Narodovoltsy, Shapovalov and Ratanskaya, who worked at the Latinsky print shop, are now in the ranks of the Communist Party. Lydia Knipovich is no longer among the living. She died in 1920 when the Crimea, where she had been living for the last few years, was under the Whites. On her deathbed, her soul yearned towards the communists, and she died with the name of the Communist Party on her lips. Among the other participants of the conference, I believe the school teachers P.F. Kudeli and A.I. Meshcherukava, both at present members of the party. One of the Nevskaya Zastava teachers was Alexandra Kalmukova, an excellent lecturer. I remember her lecture for workers on the state budget. She kept a bookstore in Latenight Street. Vladimir Ilyich became closely acquainted with her at the time. Struve was one of her pupils, and Patresov, an old schoolmate of Struve's, was a frequent visitor at her place. Later, Alexandra Kalmukova financed the old Iskra right up to the time of the Second Congress. She did not join Struve when he went over to the liberals, but definitely associated herself with the Iskraist organization. Her sobriquet was Auntie. She was very friendly with Vladimir Ilyich. Now she is dead, having been bedridden for 2 years in a nursing home at Detskaya Cielo. The children of the orphanages used to visit her occasionally, and she told them about Ilyich. She had written to me in the spring of 1924 saying that Vladimir Ilyitch's 1917 articles containing a few ardent appeals which had such a powerful effect on the masses ought to be published as a separate book. Vladimir Ilyich had written her in 1922 a few warm lines of greeting such as only he could write. Alexandra Kalmikova was closely associated with the Emancipation of Labor group. At one time, in 1899, I believe, when Vera Zasulich came to Russia, Kalmikova arranged her illegal sojourn in the country and saw her very often. Influenced by the rising tide of the workers' movement, by the articles and books of the Emancipation of Labor group, and by the St. Petersburg Social Democrats, Patresov and for the first time Struve went left. After a number of preliminary meetings, soundings were taken for joint work. It was decided to publish jointly a symposium materials characterizing our economic development. Our group was represented on the editorial board by Vladimir Ilyich, Starkov, and Stepan Radchenko. Theirs by Struve, Patresov, and Klassen. The fate of the publication is common knowledge. It was consigned to the flames by the Tsarist censor. In the spring of 1895, before going abroad, Vladimir Ilyich kept going more and more often to Ozernaya Street, where Patresov then lived, to speed up the work. Vladimir Ilyich spent the summer of 1895 abroad, living part-time in Berlin, where he attended the workers' meeting, and partly in Switzerland, where he first met Plekhanov, Axelrod, and Zasulich. He came back full of impressions and brought with him a double-lined suitcase crammed with illegal literature. The police started shadowing him the moment he arrived. They had an eye on him and his suitcase. I had a cousin who was working at the address bureau. 2 days after Vladimir Ilyich had arrived, she told me that a detective had come when she was on night duty and gone through the files, which were arranged in alphabetical order, saying boastfully, "There, we've tracked an important state criminal. Ulyanov is his name. His brother was hanged, and this one's come from abroad. He won't get away now." Knowing that I was acquainted with Vladimir Ilyich, my cousin lost no time reporting this to me. Naturally, I warned Vladimir Ilyich at once. Extreme caution was necessary. But the work could not wait. We got busy. A division of labor was organized, and the work was divided by districts. We started to draw up and circulate leaflets. I remember Vladimir Ilyich drawing up the first leaflet to the workers of Semyonikov Works. We had no printing facilities at the time. The leaflet was copied out in print hand and distributed by Babushkin. 2 of the 4 copies were picked up by the watchman, and the other 2 circulated from hand to hand. Leaflets were distributed in other districts as well. One that got out on Vasilyevsky Island for the women workers of the La Ferme tobacco factory. A. Yakubova and Z.P. Nevzarova Kryzhizhanovskaya resorted to the following methods of distribution. They rolled up the leaflets so they could conveniently be peeled off one by one and arranged their aprons in a suitable manner. Then, as soon as the whistle blew, they walked swiftly towards the women workers who came pouring out of the factory leaflet and thrust the leaflets into the hands of the puzzled woman almost at a run. The leaflet was a great success. Our leaflets roused the workers. It was decided, seeing that we had an illegal print shop to do it in, to publish also a popular journal named Rabochia Dielo, Workers' Cause. Vladimir Ilyich prepared material for it with great thoroughness. Every line of the copy passed through his hands, and I remember at a meeting at my place when Zaporozhets waxed very enthusiastically about the material which he had succeeded in collecting at the boot factory in Moskovskaya Zastava neighborhood. They fine you for everything here, he said. If you set a heel on crooked, you get fined right away. Vladimir Ilyich laughed. Well, if you set a heel on crooked, he said, then you're asking to be fined. He collected and checked all the material carefully. I remember, for instance, how the material about the Thornton mills was collected. I was to call out my pupil, Kralikov, who worked at the mills as a sorter. He had been deported from St. Petersburg once, and collect all the information from him according to the plan outlined by Vladimir Ilyich. Kralikov arrived in a posh fur coat which he had borrowed from somebody and brought a book full of notes which he supplemented verbally. His information was very valuable. Vladimir Ilyich fairly pounced on it, and afterwards A.A. Yabkubova and I, with shawls over our head, to make us look like mill workers, went to the Thornton hostel, where we visited both the single and married quarters. Conditions were appalling. It was only from information gathered this way that Vladimir Ilyich wrote his correspondence and leaflets. Look at his leaflets to the men and women employees of Thornton Mills. What a thorough knowledge of the subject it shows, and what a schooling this was for all the comrades who worked at that time. That was really when we learned how to give attention to detail, and how deeply those details have engraved themselves in our mind. Our work in Rabochia Dialo did not see the light of day. A meeting was held in my rooms on December 8th, and a final reading of the copy for the press was held. Vanev took the duplicate for a last look through, and while other copy remained with me. I went to Vanev the next morning to pick up the corrected copy, but the servant told me he had moved out the night before. We had previously arranged with Vladimir Ilyich that in case anything went wrong, I was to make inquiries of his friend Shebataryov, who was a colleague of mine on the staff of the Central Railway Administration where I was employed. Vladimir Ilyich went there every day to dine. Shebataryov was not in his office. I went to his house. Vladimir Ilyich had not been to dinner. He obviously had been arrested. Later in the day, we found out that a good many of our group had been arrested. The copy of Rabochio Dialo left on my hands I gave to Nina Gerd for safekeeping. Nina was an old school friend of mine and the future wife of Struve. Not to have any more of us arrested, it was decided for the time being not to print Rabochia Dialo. This St. Petersburg period of Vladimir Ilyich's work was of great importance. Although the work itself was noteworthy and hardly noticeable, he had described it so himself, it did not show. It was not a matter of heroic deeds, but of establishing close contact with the masses and getting closer to them. Learning to be the vehicle of their finest aspirations and learning how to win their confidence and rally them behind us. But it was during this period of his St. Petersburg work that Vladimir Ilyich was molded as the leader of the working masses. When I first came to school after these arrests, Babushkin called me aside under the stairs and handed me a leaflet concerning these arrests written by the workers. The leaflet was of purely political character. Babushkin asked me to get it printed and to let them have copies for distribution. Till then, neither of us had ever directly mentioned my being connected with the organization. I passed the leaflet on to our group. I remember that meeting. It was S.I. Radchenko's flat. All that remained of our group had gathered there. Lyakovsky read the leaflet and exclaimed, "We can't print this leaflet. Why, it's on a purely political subject." Since the leaflet had been written by the workers on their own initiative, and since they insisted on its being printed, we decided to print it. It wasn't long before we got in touch with Vladimir Ilyich. In those days, people committed for trial were freely permitted to receive books. And the books were only given a perfunctory examination during which tiny dots in the middle of the letters and the slightly changed color of the paper where milk had been used for ink escape notice. This secret correspondence technique had made swift progress with us. Vladimir Ilyitch's concern for his imprisoned comrades was characteristic of him. There was not a letter he sent out that did not contain some request concerning a fellow prisoner. So and so had no one come to visit him. It was necessary to get him a fiancé. And so had to be told through visiting relatives to look for letters in such and such a book in the prison library and on such and such a page. Another needed warm boots and so on. He corresponded with many of his imprisoned comrades to whom his letters meant a great deal. His letters dealing with work had a cheering effect. The man who received them forgot he was in prison and got him down to work himself. I remember the impression these letters made. I was arrested myself in August of 1896. They came written in milk every Sunday, which was a book receiving day. At a glance, the secret mark would tell you that the book contained a message. Hot water for tea would be handed around 6 o'clock. Then the wardress would conduct the non-political criminals to church. By the time the letter was cut up in strips and your tea brewed, and the moment the wardress went away, you began dipping the strips with hot tea to develop the text. We couldn't very well use a candle for this in prison, so Vladimir Ilyich hit on the hot water idea. These letters were wonderfully cheering and so absorbingly interesting to read. The center of all our work outside, Vladimir Ilyich, even in prison, was the center contact with the outside world. Moreover, he worked a great deal in prison. It was there he prepared the development of capitalism in Russia. He ordered all the necessary material and statistical handbooks in his legal letters. "I am sorry they have let me out so soon," he said jokingly when he was released for deportation. "I haven't quite finished the book. It will be difficult to get books in Siberia." Besides the development of capitalism, Vladimir Ilyich wrote leaflets and illegal pamphlets and a draft program for the first Congress, which did not take place until 1898, although it was planned for an earlier date, and gave his views on questions under discussion in the organization. To avoid being caught in the act of writing with milk, he kneaded little ink pots out of bread, in which he promptly popped into his mouth whenever he heard the peephole being opened. Today I have eaten 6 ink pots, he would add to his letter by the way of humorous remark. But for all his self-discipline and restraint, Vladimir Ilyich could not help succumbing to prison dumps. In one of his letters, he suggested the following plan. Whenever they were taken out for exercise in one of the windows in the corridor, afforded a momentary glimpse of the street pavement in Spalernaya. His idea was that I and Apolinara Yakubova at a definite time should come over, stand on that bit of pavement so he could see us. Apollinaria was unable to go for some reason, so I went alone, stood on the pavement for a long time, several days running. Only the plan did not work. I don't remember exactly why. While Vladimir Ilyich was in prison, our work outside kept expanding, and the workers' movement grew spontaneously. With the arrest of Martov and Lyakovsky and others, our group was weakened still further. True, new comrades joined the group, but these people were not so well up in theory and experience. There was no time for them to learn, as the movement had to be taken care of and demanded a lot of energy. Agitation was the order of the day. We simply had no time to think of propaganda. Our leaflet agitation was a great success. The strike of 30,000 textile workers of St. Petersburg, which broke out in the summer of 1896 and was influenced by the Social Democrats, had turned many heads. I remember Sylvan reading out the draft of a leaflet at a secret meeting in the woods at Pavlovsk at the beginning of August, I think it was. There was a phrase in it that had definitely limited the workers' movement to the sphere of economic struggle. After reading it out, Sylvan stopped and said laughingly, "Well, I never. What on earth made me say that?" The phrase was crossed out. In the summer of 1896, our Laktinsky printing plant was suppressed and we were no longer able to print pamphlets. Arrangements for putting out the journal had to be postponed indefinitely. During the strike of 1896, our group was joined by Taktyarov's group, known as the Monkeys, and by Chernushev's group, known as the Cocks. But so long as the Decembrists were in prison and kept in touch with the organization outside, the work ran its usual course. When Vladimir Ilyich was released, I was still in prison. Despite the state of joy a man finds himself in on coming out of prison, Vladimir Ilyich nevertheless contrived to write me a short note on party affairs. My mother told me that he had even put on weight in prison and was as cheerful as ever. I was released soon after the Vetrova affair. A prisoner named Vetrova had burned herself alive in the Peter and Paul fortress. The gendarmes released quite a number of women's prisoners, including myself. I was to remain in St. Petersburg until my case was finished, and 2 detectives were employed to shadow me. I found the organization in a very sad state. Stepan Radchenko and his wife were all that remained of active members of our group. He could not carry on the work for reasons of secrecy, but he continued to act as center and maintain contacts. He was in touch with Struve. Struve shortly afterwards married Nina Gerd, the Social Democrat. He himself was a Social Democrat of a sort at the time. He was quite incapable of doing any work in the organization, let alone underground work, but it flattered him, no doubt, to be called on for advice. He even wrote a manifesto for the first Congress of the Social Democratic Labor Party. In the winter of 1897 to 98, I went to see Struve fairly often on behalf of Vladimir Ilyich. Struve was then publishing Novaya Slava magazine, New Word, and besides, his wife was an old friend of mine. I studied Struve at the time. He was a Social Democrat then, but what surprised me was his bookishness and his almost complete lack of interest in the living tree of life, an interest which Vladimir Ilyich had so much of. Struve got a translation job for me and undertook to edit it, but he found the work irksome and quickly tired. Vladimir Ilyich would sit with me for hours over similar work, but then his style of work was quite different. With him, even such a job as a translation was a labor of love. Struve read Fete for relaxation. Someone had written of Lenin that he was fond of Fete. That isn't true. Fete was an out-and-out advocate for serfdom, with nothing in him you could get into your teeth. If anyone was fond of Fete, it was Struve. I also knew Tugan Baranovsky. I went to school with his wife, Lydia Davudova, whose mother was the publisher of the magazine Mir Baju, which means God's World. And I used to call on them at one time. Lydia was a clever and good woman, although weak-willed. She was cleverer than her husband. You always felt in talking to him that he was not one of us. I once went to him with a collecting list to support a strike. The Kostroma strike, I believe it was. He gave me something. I don't remember how many rubles, but I was obliged to a little lecture on the subject of I don't understand why strikes should be supported. A strike is an inadequate method of fighting employers. I took the money and hurried away. I wrote to Vladimir Ilyich in exile about everything I saw and heard. There was little I could write about our work of the organization, however. At the time, the first Congress consisted only of 4 people. Stepan Radchenko, his wife Lyubov, Samar, and I. Our delegate was Radchenko. On his return for Congress, however, he hardly told us anything about it. He took all the already familiar manifesto by Struve, which was hidden between the covers of a book, and burst out crying. Nearly all the Congress delegates had been arrested. I was banished to Ufa gubernia for 3 years, but obtained a transfer to the village of Shushenskaya in Minusинsk Uzyad, where Vladimir Ilyich lived, by describing myself as his fiancé. Hi, everyone. Since it's late on Saturday night and I'm a little sleepy, this is the deal. As long as I get super chats, I can answer questions. But if I don't get super chats, I will set down a 60-second timer, and I'm gone to sleep. So let's answer the first question. How does Russian nationalism have any self-respect while it flies the traitor's flag? It's not exactly the Tsar of Russia's flag. The Tsar of Russia's flag had an eagle on top of it. But I guess they have more important things to worry about than, I guess, the flag. I don't know, I guess. Yes, please, if you share it across space and time, it's equivalent of a super chat, and recommend it personally to your friends. Like, yo, you should read this thing about Tibet. I love it, kind of thing. Like, DM them. That works the best. Strikes, a lot of them. India has the world's largest population of poor people who make less than $2 a day. So of course there's lots of, I mean, yeah, like there's no reason why there should not have been a revolution yet, but yeah, inshallah. Of course they will continue to fund it and death squads and all sorts of things. The idea is to build up your forces so that it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's see. Do we have any questions? Okay. Oh, by the way, happy November 7th, which is the day of the October Revolution. It happened in this day in 1917. Okay. So I'm drinking a little bit of I'm not being paid, so I don't know why I'm like, okay. So I'm drinking some sort of like vodka laced lemonade. Cheers. Na zdrowie. So yeah, okay. So I will finish this, and if I don't get a super chat, I am out of here. These vodkanade. I like it. Lenin was a teetotaler. Like, he didn't drink alcohol at all, and he didn't smoke. Yeah. Okay. Oh, by the way, check out last Friday. We started reading Mark Twain, and I can read any book that's not copyrighted to you guys if it's leftist theory or history. So just let me know let Shmoopy Shaboopy know, and then he'll let me know, and we can do a book like after I'm done reading the Mark Twain book called King Leopold. I forgot what it's called. King Leopold. Something about King Leopold. It's like a satire book about like the King Leopold reading about the Congo Commission, and it's like but it exposes a lot of the horrible things that they did in Congo. So we're going to read that King Leopold's soliloquy. Yes. So I read that last Friday, and I guess I can read this again this Friday. It's great. And yeah, any other books, as long as it's related to history or theory or Lenin referenced it and it's not copyrighted, I can read it. I enjoy reading books actually a lot. It's actually fun. And oh yeah, we are gonna be live at 9 o'clock and on Monday morning with Comrade Zoo for Mondays with Mao. Be sure to join us then. What else are we gonna... let me see. I'll stay here until I finish this thingy. What else should we talk about? Oh yeah, oh yeah. I did get a new book. I forgot. It's called Africa's Last Colonial Currency by Ndongo Sala. So we'll have to read that. And I'm going to try to improve my reading skills so that it's like a nice, soothing NPR voice that's not strained, as opposed to whatever. As opposed to. Okay, tell me which voice you like the best. One, is this okay? No, this is too strained and harsh. Is this okay? See, of course we'll have more Giuliano. Again, too drunk for Bane right now. I'll do Bane next time. Has getting owned. Oh, Lord. So we did cover this briefly on Friday, but I guess. Okay, let me see if I can find that video. I can't. Oh, where would it be? Give me 1 second. If I can find the video, I will totally. Oh, I know. I found it. Okay, give me 1 second. It was so weird. Okay, I found the video now. So yeah, I don't know what to say other than that was really weird.
Two.
Okay, so what are those holes used for?
A lot of things. Like, what do you mean? What are you asking?
Yeah, it's just a general, like, an easy, like, biological question. What are those two holes used for?
I mean, like, bathroom-wise?
Yes.
Poop and pee?
Poop and pee. And then where's the sex one, dude?
The pee one.
Oh my
Okay.
god.
What's
Oh
your
my
point?
god. That's
What's
so
the joke?
cute. That's so fucking cute, dude. It's like, dude, you really never had a woman, like...
What is going on? What, you pee from your butt?
I have a question. How many holes does a woman have from the waist down?
That was extremely strange. Yeah. I mean, there is no girl above you or below you because that's only some nonsense for capitalism. Under socialism, every girl is in your league. But the thing is that you should be a good person and also, I don't know, I don't understand it. Well, they're really the worst of the worst in that they're Twitch people. And, yeah. And they foster the most toxic. They're like a hook for one of the most toxic people. It does not matter. But I don't know. I don't want to. It's so weird. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know why he did this. Like, there's no reason to have her on stream. And, what's going on? Oh, yeah, let's see. Yeah, it is so strange. By the way, 2 of Caleb Maupin's fan people became unsubscribers because I blasphemed Caleb, apparently. Huh? Oh god. I haven't seen more than this because I tried and I just got bored. Like, I couldn't even just, like, I have ADHD. I couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, whatever. Not watching. Yeah, I couldn't do it. Let's see. What else? yeah. Like I said, I could not watch it, so I can't say. I'll just take your word for it. But yeah, I am really done with this Oh, actually, let me show you what else. I am done with this patriotic, whatever this nonsense is. Patriotic, whatever, patriotic, I don't know, what is it? Patriotic, whatever this is. Give me a second. Okay, oh yeah, one of Haz's friends got upset that I called socialism done well. No, sorry. Socialism done left. Socialism done left. I believe I called him an inbred Prussian prince because he looks just like Prince Wilhelm of the Prussian Empire. And he was like, "Oh my God, you on your debate you called either Haas or an socialist, one of them, an inbred prince. No, an inbred." And I'm like, "Yeah, I called him an inbred Prussian prince." So that was weird. Yeah, that was just like so weird. Oh, I can do this. This is actually much nicer. Okay. Nah. Whose dad is that? The inbred Prussian prince? Oh, how fitting. Okay. Yeah. And my friend Matt, uncle_authority, is working, I guess, on an article, and we also pre-taped this reaction to a certain video of a certain person with a kind of a strange Jehovah's Witness vibe and perhaps a budding leftist cult. It's so weird. I don't know what to say other than what. So when you go to their website, oh my God, it's so. They have this thing about Odin, and I just don't know. And yes, we all love uncle_authority. Follow him. Yeah, it's like really, really strange. Whew. Whoa, we've been going for 3.5 hours. Wow, we are going. So at 3 o'clock, who said, oh, is it, okay, yes, this guy was like, revolutionary nonviolence is, no, what is it? Revolutionary, not, I can't do his voice. Rapper Jeonju does a great job with his imitating this person, but it's revolutionary violence. Revolutionary violence is anti-Marxist. Marxists want to avoid violence. And yeah, and we're gonna have 50 AOCs elected with our cult where we yell, okay, I just can't do this. Okay, I'm just gonna go for it. Why not? I mean, oh my God, it's really, I don't know what to say other than what the bleepity bleep. Okay, let's see. Oh, and then everyone needs to wear suits. Oh my God. So let's just, okay, I'll just upload this.
But they were all millions of people, trade unions and student organizations, not ultra-leftists, and they were not isolated from their society. They led organizations of millions of people, trade unions and student organizations.
Oh, you don't need.
And you know, they wore
suits,
okay. Suits and ties. It's practically forbidden in American communist circles, but they wore suits and ties.
He's like Jordan Peterson, but like he's like literally Jordan Peterson, but I don't know what else to say besides like a weird version of Jordan Peterson. I mean, yeah, like literally there's like no other words to say besides a weird Jordan Peterson. Yes, that's exactly it. Let's see if we can find the other one, the Bernsteinism one. Let's see, where would it be? Okay, this one's really weird too. This is the cult.
Listen now.
Can you hear, guys? Here?
Theology or alignment to have a team on the ground every day, and we folks have that. Be out on the streets distributing literature about our organization. This is a rare thing and it's a blessed thing. We have, within the last 2 to 3 weeks, distributed over 1,200 copies of our palm card. I also distributed over 600 pins and buttons that read "Cancel Student Debt" or "In the Wars, Bring the Troops Home."
Revolutionaries, and we'll win the battle.
It's so damn wrong.
Build a new type of common sense for the 21st century. That we fight for the Bill of Rights, an economic Bill of Rights that was proposed by FDR, New Deal, so that we may be on the road to socialism in our lifetime.
If you're a parent and your child doesn't have proper clothing and it's wintertime and they're coming to school without proper clothes, you can be arrested. Why? You can be charged with criminal neglect. Well, I charge the government of the United States with criminal neglect at this moment. Criminal neglect. Our country is falling apart. Roads are crumbling. Schools are crumbling. There's an opioid epidemic. People are dying. People are hungry. People are homeless. People don't have jobs. And they're focused on bombing and destroying countries around the world instead of feeding Americans. I charge the government of the United States with criminal neglect. We at the Center for Political Innovation say it's time that instead of having a government that sits on its hands, what Roosevelt called do-nothing government, it's time that we have a government of action that fights for working families.
See, I mean, ultimately what he's trying to sell is some sort of a Jehovah's Witness with AOC branded light socialism that takes all the interest, like everything out of it. And it's like, I believe it's like some funneling thing for his books, or God knows what his silly organization is for. But because I blasphemed Caleb, 2 of my subscribers became unsubscribers. And I'm like, oh Lord, you guys have a cult of personality. Yeah, that's a good, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Think tank for what purpose? Like they'll only use, yeah, I can read on authority. Let me do it on, let's see. How about Monday? No, let's do it on, actually, we can do it Tuesday, either in the morning or the evening. So let me know what time works for everyone the best, and I'll do it Tuesday. So with that, I'm going to say Смерти фашизму и слободу народу.